Chapter 63. A short while later, Paisio was brought back by one of Madame Anne's servants. From afar his gaze landed on Yun Ruoyan. In the pavilion, Yun Ruoyan was sitting diagonally by the Yun matriarch's side. Her pink dress seemed to blend into the phoenix orchid forest behind her, and her face was as white as the petals of a phoenix orchid. It was so pink and tender that one couldn't help but want to reach out and pinch her cheeks. Paisio couldn't help but rub his hands together as he quickly walked toward the pavilion. At this time Yun Ruoyan and the Yun matriarch were talking about something with their heads close to each other. Both of them were smiling and they didn't seem to notice that someone was approaching. Paisio walked into the pavilion and was just about to ask Yun Ruoyan where she had gone when he suddenly saw a servant kneeling on the ground. Xianxia's maid. Why is there a servant kneeling here? He couldn't help but ask, looking toward Xianxia curiously. Xianxia's eyes were red as if she had just been crying. She opened her mouth slightly but in the end she didn't say brother Ao. She made a mistake and the old madam is making her kneel as punishment. Madame Anne replied. Because of his relationship with Xianxia, Paisio was quite familiar with Xiang. She was delicate and obedient and every time she saw him she would blush slightly, making her look rather adorable. What did you do wrong? Paisio looked at Xiang's shivering back and his tone carried a hint of pity. Yun Ruoyu opened her mouth to speak. Ahem. The old madam coughed, interrupting her. She turned around but without looking at Paisio she said coolly, this is the Yun family's business. Young Master Pei, you don't have to worry about it. She had originally quite liked this handsome young master of the Pei family, but now that she looked at him again she felt that beneath his handsome appearance, there was a hint of a lecher in him. I'm tired so let's call it a day. The Yun matriarch extended a hand toward Yun Ruoyan. Yes. Yun Ruoyan nodded, holding the Yun matriarch's arm as they walked out of the pavilion. When she passed by Paisio he couldn't help but ask, Run, I was worried that you'd accidentally trespassed on the hunting grounds. Thank goodness you're back. Where did you go? Thank you for your concern, young Master Pei, but you should ask Sister Qianying about this. When they returned to Peony's cottage, Xilan vividly described to Peony what had happened that day, starting from the carriage to the Yun matriarch's loving words for Yun Ruoyan. This is the first time I've seen Miss act like a spoiled child. Xilan had a look of disbelief on her face. Then with a hint of pride she said to Peony, as soon as our young Miss acts coquettishly, the old lady listens to everything she says. Xilan enough. Yun Ruoyan couldn't bear to listen any longer. She lay down on the couch and turned to look at Xilan. You can't say such things outside, understand? Peony patted Xilan's forehead with a smile. The old lady may look old and she doesn't seem to care much, but her heart's as clear as a mirror. How could she possibly listen to anyone else's words? You'd better watch your mouth or you'll cause trouble. Xilan stuck out her tongue then smiled. I picked a lot of phoenix flowers today. The stamens can be used to make pastries, and the remaining petals can be used to make pillows. I'm going to pluck the stamens now. With that she skipped out of the room. Peony poured a cup of freshly brewed tea and handed it to Yun Ruoyan. Miss, why did you spare Missy today? In Peony's eyes, today was a perfect opportunity for her to slap the old lady in the face. Although Yun Ruoyan had slapped the old lady, it didn't seem to be enough, and she had only managed to kill Xiang. It's not time yet. Yun Ruoyan took the tea and took a sip. Peony's eyes brightened. Was there still a chance if it wasn't time yet? In the past it had always been others who plotted against Yun Ruoyan and most of the time Yun Ruoyan had been meek and submissive. Until a few months ago when Qianying had stolen the old lady's jade ornament and framed Yun Ruoyan. It was at that time that Yun Ruoyan seemed to suddenly have an epiphany. Not only did she absolve herself of the crime, she even pointed out that Qianying was the true thief. It was also at that time that Peony discovered that Yun Ruoyan had begun to change from the inside out. Madame Anne seemed to have noticed Yun Ruoyan's change as well. Half a month ago she would only send Ling Lan to report on Yun Ruoyan's condition. Now she would send someone to look for Ling Lan every few days. Was there going to be some sort of operation? And this time, Yun Ruoyan wouldn't be as meek and submissive as before. Yun Ruoyan looked at Peony's bright eyes wanting to seduce her. Peony, do you know what time I'm talking about? Peony frowned. Even if Madame Anne were to deal with Yun Ruoyan, wouldn't she be able to punish Miss E? Moreover, according to Xilan, Miss E had been punished today, so she would likely restrain herself for some time. After a long while, Peony shook her head. I'm too slow-witted to think of anything. Yun Ruian handed the half-finished cup of tea back to Peony and lay back down on the couch. That's when the old madam starts to hate her granddaughter. At that time I might not even have to do anything but... Yun Ruian closed her eyes midway through her sentence. Miss. Seeing that Yun Ruian was silent, Peony's breathing slowly calmed down. She stepped forward and called out to Yun Ruian. Once she was sure that Yun Ruian had fallen asleep, she quietly retreated. Today's battle with the 20 guards in the hunting grounds had left Yun Ruian somewhat exhausted. In addition, she had expended a large amount of her mental energy in order to sense the fire attribute in her spiritual energy. As soon as she lay down on her couch, she immediately felt drowsy. Moreover, she was in her own courtyard, and as soon as she lowered her guard, Yun Ruian actually fell asleep. Yun Ruian slept soundly, not even dreaming. At dinner, Peony came in to check on her. Seeing that she was still sound asleep, she didn't wake her, instead covering her with a thin blanket. The sky gradually darkened and Yun Ruian's room was completely silent. Creak. The silence was broken by a soft creak as the back window opened again. A figure darker than the darkness of the night flew by like a gust of wind and landed on the ground. Li Mo's icy blue eyes glowed coldly in the dark. He stood quietly in front of her couch, looking down at her. Xianxia was cultivating in the bracelet's pocket dimension when it suddenly sensed a powerful aura slowly approaching. It was very familiar with this aura. It was the slaughtering king from earlier in the day. Just as it was about to open its mouth to wake Yun Ruian up, a cold voice rang out in its mind. Xianxia, long time no see. Xianxia was startled. It was actually communicating telepathically. On the Qinyuan continent, there was actually someone who could use their mental energy to penetrate the bracelet seal and communicate directly with it. Who are you? Xianxia used its own mental energy to ask. Little thing, not only do you have little strength left, have you even lost your memories? The cold voice didn't contain a trace of emotion. Xianxia was even more shocked. You recognize me? Who are you? I'm your master. The emotionless voice finally took on a stern tone. My master died more than 10 years ago. Who are you and why are you impersonating him? Xianxia continued. The son pays his father's debts and the son avenges his father's wrongs. Naturally, his father's belongings should be inherited by his son. Xianxia immediately stood up. You're the son of the Beast King. You're Sinimo. Ha! The cold voice let out a cold laugh and said, Little thing, you finally recognized me. Xianxia stood up, its tone agitated. Sinimo, how did you become a king of the Li Kingdom? Li Mo didn't answer Xianxia's question. Instead he asked, What about you? How did you end up here? I thought you died with my father. Within the space within the bracelet, Xianxia slowly sat down. Her two large amber eyes were covered with a layer of gray. Slowly, she began to recount the dust-laden past that no one in the world knew about. More than 10 years ago, the Beast King and I were surrounded by those old monsters. Because the Beast King had been ambushed, he was even less of a match for them. I was surrounded by the Taotai beast and the 4 beasts, and had no time to protect the Beast King. All I could do was watch as the Beast King slowly died under their attacks. Xianxia closed its eyes sorrowfully, its usually cheerful voice filled with sorrow. I tried my best, but I wasn't a match for the Taotai beast and the 4 beasts. My soul was almost destroyed and I thought that I would die with the Beast King. But the long-browed monster didn't kill me. Instead he sealed me away, Xianxia continued. Xianxia continued, When I woke up I was sealed in this bracelet. My primordial spirit had many cracks and my spiritual ocean was nearly destroyed. It took me nearly 10 years to recover to my current state. Xianxia looked down at its small, round body, its tone bitter. However, if I want to return to my previous appearance, I must rely on my master's power. So, when my current master accidentally dripped her blood on the bracelet, I sucked her blood and willingly signed a blood contract with her. So, Sinimo, my current master is Yun Ruian. Xianxia raised its round head. The Beast King was my previous master, but he has already died. With his death, the contract between us was automatically nullified. As such, I'm not the Beast King's possession, and you have no right to inherit me. Oh? So that's how it is. Li Mo's cold voice trailed off. It sounded like a bone-chilling winter wind brushing past one's face, sending a chill down one's spine. In the darkness of the night, his icy blue gaze fell upon the sleeping Yun Ruoyan. Gradually, his gaze became murderous. Xiao. His lips curled into a bloodthirsty smile, and his voice seemed to freeze the entire world. If I were to kill your new master, wouldn't you become an ownerless object? Cinema, what are you doing? Don't. Xiao could feel Li Mo's murderous intent and hurriedly tried to stop him. However, Li Mo had already raised his slender palm, and his fingers curled into claws. Sharp nails grew out of his fingers and he clawed at Yun Ruoyan's heart. Chapter 64. In the bracelet's pocket dimension, Xiao had already covered its eyes, certain that Yun Ruoyan was doomed. As far as Xiao was concerned, no one could escape Li Mo's murderous intent. It had even given up on the idea of waking Yun Ruoyan up. Dying in her sleep was far better than waking up and facing death head-on. All it could do for Yun Ruoyan now was to remain silent. However, just as Li Mo's sharp nails were about to pierce Yun Ruoyan's heart, he suddenly stopped. His gaze was drawn to the string of wooden beads on Yun Ruoyan's wrist. That string of beads was the one he had given to Yun Ruoyan earlier in the day. At this moment, the beads were emitting a faint red glow. Li Mo raised his brows, his icy blue eyes twinkling. That string of beads had been personally given to him by his father on his birthday when he was 6 years old. At the time, he had thought that the beads were very ordinary, just like any other string of wooden beads. However, the Beast King had told him that the beads were called Qilin beads, made from 1,000-year-old fusang wood wrapped around the beast core of a flame Qilin. The beast core of a flame Qilin contained extremely strong fire-attuned spiritual energy, so strong that even the Beast King couldn't absorb it. The only thing he could do was seal it with the fusang wood. The Beast King told Li Mo that although no one could absorb this spiritual energy, wearing it for long periods of time would strengthen the wearer's fire-attuned spiritual energy, making it an excellent supplement for pill masters. Ever since Li Mo had put it on at the age of 6, he had never taken it off again. During the day, because he didn't have anything else on him, he had taken it off and given it to Yun Ruoyan as a reward, intending to retrieve it at night. However, to his surprise, the Qilin beads that he had worn for more than a decade suddenly emitted a faint wave of spiritual energy on Yun Ruoyan's wrist. Just what was so special about this ugly girl from the Yun family? How could she cause the core of a flame Qilin to ripple with spiritual energy? His immense curiosity temporarily suppressed the murderous intent in Li Mo's chest. He pulled back his hood and leaned over to observe Yun Ruoyan. In the darkness of the night, only the faint red glow of the Qilin beads could be seen. The faint red light shone on Li Mo's face, revealing half of Yun Ruoyan's beautiful face to Li Mo's icy blue eyes. Li Mo slowly closed his eyes, his brows relaxing. Just inches away from Yun Ruoyan, he took in a deep breath. It was as if he had smelled something wonderful and he seemed to be enjoying it. That's right. This was the smell. The first time Li Mo saw Yun Ruoyan, he had been mesmerized by the fragrance she emanated, and he couldn't help but want to get close to her. When he met her again in the Phoenix Orchid Forest during the day, it was still the same. That was why he kissed her twice involuntarily. Li Mo himself was a little surprised. When had he become so thirsty for women? So that was how it was. Possessing a strange fragrance that could cause the inner core of a divine beast to fluctuate with spiritual energy. Could it be that this ugly girl from the Yun family was the legendary human cauldron that hadn't appeared for 1,000 years? It's no wonder that such a potent poison couldn't kill you. Li Mo couldn't help thinking. Even he would have been in big trouble if he had been poisoned by that poison. Most people would have died of ulceration, but Yun Ruoyan had only been disfigured and her cultivation restricted. Back then, Lin Yueme had died of ulceration all over her body, a gruesome sight to behold. In order to avoid gossip and protect the Yun family's reputation, the Yun family had hastily buried her. Yun Ruoyan's unique constitution had given her a strong resistance to poison, which was why she had managed to survive. However, her face and cultivation had still been disfigured by the poison. Human cauldrons were actually a term used by some leftist cultivators to refer to people with unique constitutions. Although these people had ordinary bodies, they were extremely talented in cultivation, and the bottlenecks that everyone would encounter in their cultivation wouldn't occur to them. If one were to dual cultivate with them, Not only would they be able to increase their cultivation speed, but they could also borrow their strength to easily break through bottlenecks. This was why they were called human cauldrons. Li Mo was currently at a bottleneck in his cultivation as a peak blade master. If he had the help of a human cauldron, it would be like adding wings to a tiger. The corners of Li Mo's mouth curled up in delight, but then he frowned slightly. Unfortunately, this woman's cultivation was too low, and she wasn't qualified to dual cultivate with him. It seemed that not only couldn't he kill this ugly woman, he had to slowly nurture her. Li Mo raised the hand that had been about to kill Yun Ruoyan, stuck out his slender middle finger and bit it lightly. A large drop of blood flowed out. With a flip of his hand, the drop of blood landed on the Qilin bracelet on Yun Ruoyan's wrist. Then the red glow on the bracelet slowly receded until it completely dimmed. Within the pocket dimension, Qiuqiu didn't know what Li Mo was thinking, nor did it know that Yun Ruoyan was a human cauldron. It was just a little confused as to why Li Mo hadn't made a move yet. At the same time, it was hoping that Li Mo had changed his mind. When it felt Li Mo drip his own blood into the Qilin beads, it confirmed its suspicions. "Sunemo, do you not want to kill her anymore?" Qiuqiu asked tentatively. "That's right," Li Mo replied. Compared to his previous coldness, his tone now carried a hint of happiness. "I've changed my mind. Since you've already decided that she's your new mistress, I don't want to make things difficult for you." Li Mo put on his cloak and suddenly turned to Qiuqiu. "There are some things that might not be a good thing for your mistress to know. As long as you don't hurt her again, I won't tell her about you," Qiuqiu promised. Li Mo wasn't someone that it or Yun Ruoyan dared to provoke. "Good then," Li Mo replied. "Help her cultivate well, and I hope that you'll be able to return to your former self as soon as possible." He turned and dashed out of the window like a gust of wind. The Qilin bracelet and the bracelet were worn on Yun Ruoyan's left wrist. Compared to the bracelet's simplicity, the bracelet seemed so ordinary that it looked no different from a child's toy that could be found on the streets. But at this moment, the seal on the bracelet had been slightly cracked by Li Mo's beastkin blood. Traces of imperceptible fire-attuned spiritual energy began to seep into Yun Ruoyan's body. In her dreams, Yun Ruoyan suddenly felt her entire body warm up. Specks of red light danced in her mind, circling and floating. She entered a dreamscape of dancing fireflies. The next day, Yun Ruoyan woke up at the crack of dawn. She felt as if her entire body had been bathed in the warmth of the sun, and it was indescribably comfortable. "Ah." Yun Ruoyan sat up from the couch and stretched lazily, muttering to herself, "It's quite comfortable to slack off once in a while." Suddenly, Qiuqiu's voice rang out in her mind. "Mistress, you're awake. Qiuqiu, you're up early today too." Yun Ruoyan smiled. As far as she was concerned, as long as she didn't speak to Qiuqiu, it would remain asleep. It would rarely greet her so early in the morning. "Mistress, do you feel any changes in your body?" Qiuqiu asked tentatively. "Changes?" Yun Ruoyan subconsciously lowered her head to make sure that nothing had changed. She touched her own face and then suddenly realized something. "I think my body feels warm and comfortable." Qiuqiu wasn't unfamiliar with the Qilin bracelet, but it had been sleeping when Li Mo had given it to Yun Ruoyan. Last night, when it felt Li Mo drip his blood onto the bracelet, it realized that Yun Ruoyan was wearing a string of beads. Upon closer inspection, it couldn't help but be shocked. It was the Qilin bracelet that the Beast King had given to Li Mo all those years ago. Qiuqiu couldn't understand Li Mo's actions, but it couldn't voice its doubts to Yun Ruoyan. "Mistress, feel for the fire attunement in your spiritual energy," Qiuqiu instructed. Yun Ruoyan's eyes lit up. Could it be that her cultivation these past few days had paid off? She hurriedly sat down on her bed. When she opened her eyes, they were filled with pleasant surprise. "Qiuqiu, I can feel the fire attunement in my spiritual energy," she cried out excitedly. In Lin Zainan's study, Yun Ruoyan stood quietly in the middle of the room. Her grandfather Lin Qingchen and Lin Qingxue all held their breaths as they looked at her. Yun Ruoyan had been standing there for 2 hours and Lin Qingxue was getting impatient. She turned to look at Lin Qingchen and her grandfather. "Condensing spiritual fire isn't something that can be done in a day," Lin Zainan began. His voice was very soft and he wasn't speaking to Yun Ruoyan, but to Lin Qingchen and Lin Qingxue. At first I thought that it would take at least 3 years for Ruoan to sense the fire attunement in her spiritual energy. Lin Zainan stroked his beard, trying his best to suppress his excitement. But in just a few days she's already reached such a level. In the morning Yun Ruoan went to the Lin Manor and told Lin Zainan that she had sensed the fire attunement in her spiritual energy. Lin Zainan was shocked, delighted and incredulous. He immediately taught Yun Ruoan a set of techniques for condensing the fire attunement. Without another word Yun Ruoan began cultivating on the spot. Remember this. Lin Zainan turned to his 2 granddaughters. When it comes to cultivation it's not just about talent but also about diligence. The Lin sisters nodded in agreement. Yun Ruoan cleared her mind of all distracting thoughts, focusing all her attention on the spiritual vortex in her dantian. At this time, apart from a large amount of spiritual energy from the heavens and the earth, there was also a small amount of red spiritual mist. This was what she had condensed according to the technique Lin Zainan had taught her. Sister Ruoan, it's moving, Lin Xianxia suddenly whispered, and the 3 girls couldn't help but focus even more. Yun Ruoan raised her arms, palms facing each other, and traces of red mist seeped out of her palms. That's a fire-attuned spiritual mist. Ruoan's drawing it out of her body. Lin Zainan exclaimed. There were far too few opportunities to watch someone condense spiritual fire, especially during their first attempt. Both Lin Qingchen and Lin Xianxia kept their eyes wide open, not wanting to miss a single detail. The red mist swirled between Yun Ruoan's palms, becoming smaller and smaller as it spun and the faster it spun. Lin Zainan knew that Yun Ruoan had reached a critical juncture in the process, and he couldn't help but feel nervous. His fingers, which were stroking his beard, gripped the tail of his beard tightly. Although Lin Qingchen and Lin Xianxia didn't know what stage Yun Ruoan was at, they couldn't help but feel nervous when they saw the red mist swirling around Yun Ruoan's palms like a whirlwind. Spiritual fire, spiritual fire. Lin Xianxia pointed at the flickering spark in Yun Ruoan's palms, jumping up and down in excitement. Pfft! Amidst Lin Xianxia's excited cries, the flickering spark suddenly went out. Yun Ruoan sighed deeply and looked at her 3 relatives, a tired smile on her face. Grandfather, I can't, she exclaimed. Lin Zainan laughed heartily and strode forward, placing a large hand on Yun Ruoan's shoulder. Ruoan, you've already shocked me. Back then it took me 4 whole years to reach your level. Lin Zainan raised 4 fingers. Then it took me another year to condense the spiritual flame. That's a total of 5 years. And you actually used it. Lin Zainan raised 5 fingers then curled 2. You only used 3 days. If word of this got out, those old fellows in the pill-making world would be so shocked that their eyeballs would pop out. Grandfather, please don't tell anyone. Yun Ruoan hurriedly pleaded. I know, Lin Zainan agreed. Yun Ruoan didn't want to contribute her talent to the Yun family right now. Sister Ruoan, don't worry, we won't tell anyone. Lin Xianxia and Lin Qingchen also walked to Yun Ruoan's side, looking at her worshipfully. Old Master Miss Yun. Lin Bo's voice came from outside the door. The Yun family has sent someone to escort Miss Yun home. What's going on? Lin Zainan frowned. They just arrived this morning. What's the matter? Lin Bo replied from outside. The Yun family said that the Crown Prince will be visiting the Yun family as a guest soon, and they're sending everyone to welcome him. The Crown Prince was going to the Yun family. Yun Ruoan couldn't help but recall the image of the youth in yellow robes on the palanquin that day. Chapter 65. Actually, Yun Ruoan wasn't unfamiliar with the Crown Prince, Li Qianxiao. Perhaps because he was trying to win over the officials or for some other reason, Li Qianxiao was the one who liked to visit the officials and nobles the most. Yun Ruoan had seen him both before her rebirth and in her past life, but at that time she had been too shy to step foot in public. Most of the time she would hide behind the crowd or claim that she was ill. As a result, Yun Ruoan was definitely a stranger to Li Qianxiao. Humph. After hearing Uncle Lin's reply, Lin Zainan snorted in dissatisfaction. That Yun Lan has finally sharpened his eyes. The family members also know that they need you, the daughter of the first wife, to be present. In the past, the Yun family would surely have ignored Yun Ruoan's existence. Now that they had sent someone to fetch her, however, it was clear that Yun Ruoan's status in the Yun family had risen significantly. Yun Ruoan, however, was neither happy nor angry. She knew very well that if she had any value, the Yun family would naturally value her. If she was useless, the Yun family would abandon her once more. This had nothing to do with kinship but with profit. Grandfather. Yun Ruoyan turned to Lin Zainan. In that case, I'll head back first. I'll come visit you when I'm free. Don't tire yourself out when you're cultivating. Your health is the most important, understand? Lin Zainan reminded her. As soon as she left the study, Yun Ruoyan pulled on Lin Qingchen. Qingchen, do you have any more of those gauze veils? Actually, Lin Qingchen had wanted to ask her why she hadn't brought any, and whether it was uncomfortable to wear, but Yun Ruoyan had asked for them first. Yes. Lin Qingchen took out a dozen pieces of gauze. Yun Ruoyan took them in her hands. There were 7 pieces of gauze in total, all of the colors of the rainbow, and they were all in different shapes. Not only were there lotus leaves, but there were also bamboo leaves, lotus flowers, peach blossoms, and phoenix flowers. Wow, they're so pretty. Lin Qingxue also ran over to join in the fun. Sister Qingchen, you're so biased. You bought something nice for Sister Ruan but not me. Lin Qingchen ignored her words, but Yun Ruoyan smiled. Your complexion is rosy and radiant, so why are you wearing this? Lin Qingxue took a peach blossom gauze from Yun Ruoyan's hands and placed it on her own face. As soon as she put on the veil, Lin Qingxue's round face immediately turned into an oval face. Her facial features were beautiful, and with this kind of makeup, it really made her look more beautiful. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but compliment her. This is called concealing one's face like a pipa, she said smugly. It's very popular among the girls of the large clans. Popular? What do you mean? Lin Qingchen asked curiously. Yun Ruoyan also looked at Lin Qingxue curiously. Lin Qingxue sighed and looked at her 2 sisters helplessly. One of you reads books all day while the other cultivates all day. I'm the only one who can tell you what happens on the streets. As it turned out, the owner of a ready-made clothing business had been admiring the flowers on the Phoenix Mountain when he happened to see a young miss dressed in such a fashion. That young miss was so beautiful that he was inspired to make a lot of gauze and sell it. Unexpectedly, his business was so good that customers had to queue up to have it custom-made. Yun Ruoyan and Lin Qingchen glanced at each other in disbelief. That beautiful young miss must have been none other than Yun Ruoyan. And the shop owner wasn't suddenly inspired. He was clearly plagiarizing her. However, Yun Ruoyan and Lin Qingchen didn't take such a trivial matter to heart, and they simply laughed it off. Only after Yun Ruoyan and Lin Qingchen had walked far away did Lin Qingxue react. That's not right. If they didn't know about this, where did they buy so much gauze? After returning from the Lin Manor, Yun Ruoyan didn't return to her rooms. Instead, she went straight to the guest hall. In the hall, all of the women present had changed into more formal attire, except of course for Yun Ruoyan, who had just entered. The Li Kingdom valued etiquette, and they were particularly particular about their attire, especially for the nobility. Their attire was generally divided into 2 types. Casual attire such as the gauze dress that Yun Ruoyan was wearing at the moment for ease of movement. The other kind was formal attire, which was worn during festivals or when meeting important people. It was very grand, complicated, and gorgeous at the same time. Yun Ruoyan looked around and the hall was filled with vibrant colors. Yun Ruoyao, Yi Qianying, and the others didn't need to be mentioned. Even Yun Ruoyan's grandmother was dressed in a sapphire pleated skirt, a phoenix hairpin in her hair. She looked hale and hearty, a far cry from her usual snoozing appearance. Ruan, why did you come dressed like that? Madame An was dressed in a peony red gown, with peony petals embroidered on the hem of her skirt with gold thread. She looked Yun Ruoyan up and down, then chastised her. As the wife-born daughter of the Yun family, don't you know how to treat guests? Yun Ruoyan naturally knew how to treat guests, but as the wife-born daughter of the Yun family, her wardrobe was quite shabby. In these few short months, Yun Ruoyan had grown half a head taller, and the clothes that she didn't have in the first place were now almost unbearable. Even the casual attire she was wearing these days was Lin Yueme's clothes, which she had brought from the Lins. At the beginning, Xilan had prepared 2 sets of clothes for Yun Ruoyan, but Yun Ruoyan didn't want her to attract too much attention, so she didn't let her make any more. Mother, I've grown quite a bit during this time and I can't even wear my formal attire anymore. Why don't I feign illness and refuse to see guests today? It was rare for Yun Ruoyan to say something that Madame An liked to hear. Madame An was just about to tell her to go home and rest when the Yun matriarch interjected. Of course not. You're the wife-born daughter of the Yun family, and how could you be absent from such an important event as welcoming the crown prince? Xiaolan, the Yun matriarch instructed. Take the second miss to change into the formal attire I've prepared for her. Yun Ruoyan hadn't expected her grandmother to prepare clothes for her. Although she didn't want to see the crown prince, she had no choice. Despite her reluctance, she still put on a happy expression. Thank you, grandmother. You're the best. Alright, go on, go on. The Yun matriarch smiled. The formal attire was quite troublesome to put on, but with Xiaolan's help, it didn't take long for Yun Ruoyan to look completely new. When Yun Ruoyan walked into the main hall with Xiaolan's support, everyone was stunned, especially Yun Lan, who had only just entered and sat down. In that instant, he almost thought that his beautiful ex-wife had come back to life. Yun Ruoyan wore a red waistcoat embroidered with a golden phoenix flower, paired with a matching wide-sleeved silk shirt, and a long pleated skirt with a phoenix flower on it. Her hair was tied up in a loose bun at the back of her head, and there was a golden dangling ornament with a ruby dangling from it. Her face wasn't overly adorned, save for a pink veil with phoenix petals on the right side of her face to hide her birthmark. Although she looked gorgeous, she didn't look burdensome, beautiful but not glaring. At the same time, her bearing as the wife-born daughter of a noble family was more than sufficient. The Yun matriarch was quite satisfied with the effect her eyes had on Yun Ruoyan, and she looked at her affectionately. Yun Lan's eyes flashed with a light that even he himself didn't understand. Yun Ruoyu, Yun Ruoyao, and Yi Qianying were all looking at Yun Ruoyan with admiration, jealousy and hatred. What the hell? Madame An was a little shocked. It's too similar. It's as if that hateful woman has come back from the dead. Just then a servant ran in and bowed to Yun Lan. Master, the crown prince is about to arrive. Only then did everyone look away from Yun Ruoyan. Yun Lan led the way to the main gates to await the crown prince's arrival. Not long after, a procession of 10 or so people arrived at the Yun manor, the crown prince Li Qianxiao riding in the middle of the procession. Yun Lan immediately went up to him and bowed, and the women followed suit. Official Yun, didn't I say that I was only here for a visit? Why do you have to make it so formal? Li Qianxiao dismounted from his horse and chided the crown prince. Yun Lan smiled. Your Highness, it's been half a year since you visited and I'm a little apprehensive. Please, Your Highness. Official Yun, please. Li Qianxiao led the way through the main door. Yun Ruoyan raised her head slightly. Li Qianxiao was dressed in a purplish gold robe, his hair tied up with a jade crown. He looked quite handsome and his bearing and etiquette were both extraordinary. When she thought back to the foppish youth she had seen lying on the palanquin in the hunting grounds, it was as if he were a completely different person. She couldn't help but sigh. There were many people in this world who would pretend to be one way in front of others and the other behind their backs, especially the members of the imperial family. Grandmother, how have you been recently? Li Qianxiao stopped by the Yun matriarch's side. As an honorary matriarch, the Yun matriarch didn't need to kneel and she only bowed slightly. Grandmother, thank you for your concern, Your Highness, the Yun matriarch replied. Li Qianxiao nodded. Just as he was about to continue walking, he caught sight of Yun Ruoyan, who was kneeling by the Yun matriarch's side. Who's this young lady? Why does she look so unfamiliar? Yun Ruoyan hadn't expected Li Qianxiao to suddenly ask such a question and she froze. The Yun matriarch hurriedly replied, This is the eldest daughter of the Yun family, Yun Ruoyan. She then reached out to help Yun Ruoyan up. Ruoyan, quickly pay your respects to the crown prince. Yun Ruoyan frowned slightly. After confirming that no one had seen her face that day in the Phoenix Forest, she calmed down and bowed. Ruoyan pays her respects to Your Highness. Greetings, Your Highness. Yun Ruoyan. Li Qianxiao repeated the name deep in thought. Then, as if suddenly remembering something, he began, You're that? Just then one of the servants behind Li Qianxiao suddenly coughed, interrupting Li Qianxiao's ugly daughter of the Yun clan. Li Qianxiao turned back slightly, then continued, So you're the eldest daughter of the Yun family. I've come to the Yun manor many times, but I've never seen you before. Raise your head and let me have a look. Yun Ruoyan pursed her lips and slowly raised her head. Li Qianxiao's eyes lit up as a beautiful face appeared in front of him. He stared blankly for a moment, then suddenly pointed at the phoenix petal veil on Yun Ruoyan's right cheek. "It's you. You're the masked girl who barged into the hunting grounds that day." Chapter 66. Everyone present was stunned by Li Qianxiao's sudden words, including Yun Ruoyan. But that was impossible. She was so far away and no one had seen her face. How could the crown prince possibly recognize her? "Your Highness, I don't understand what you're talking about. What veiled woman?" Although Yun Ruoyan was shocked, she didn't let it show on her face. Her eyebrows were slightly furrowed, and her clear eyes looked toward Li Qianxiao suspiciously. Li Qianxiao's finger was still in midair, but when he met Yun Ruoyan's clear gaze, he couldn't help but stare blankly. He'd seen his fair share of beauties in his life, all of them beautiful and alluring. Even his sisters were exceptional. But the woman in front of him didn't seem to exist in this world. Only a fairy from the heavens could possess such clear, bright eyes. "Your Highness." One of Li Qianxiao's servants nudged Li Qianhan from behind. Only then did Li Qianxiao snap out of his daze and retract his finger. "Your Highness, who did you just say my daughter was?" Yun Lan, who was walking beside Li Qianxiao, asked. "And what do you mean by that veiled woman who barged into the forbidden grounds?" "Oh, father and I went hunting in the Minghuang mountain yesterday, and we met a masked woman in the hunting ground. Just now I thought your daughter looked like her." Li Qianxiao tilted his head slightly as he answered Yun Lan's question, but his gaze was still on Yun Ruoyan. When Yun Ruoyan's gaze met his, she immediately lowered her head in a flustered manner, a few strands of hair falling by her ears and covering most of her face. Ever since he'd seen Yun Ruoyan in the forbidden grounds yesterday, Li Qianxiao couldn't stop thinking about her. He'd often fantasized about what she'd looked like beneath that veil. When he'd suddenly seen Yun Ruoyan's beautiful veiled face, it was as if that hazy fantasy had suddenly jumped out at him, and he'd blurted it out without a second thought. But after that fleeting moment, even Li Qianxiao himself felt that his thoughts were a little absurd. Ada said that she was already a peak 7th rank blade master, and that the Yun family's wife-born daughter was rumored to be a good-for-nothing. But Li Qianxiao couldn't help but narrow his eyes as he looked at Yun Ruoyan. She was dressed in an elegant robe, and she was kneeling in front of him like a noble young lady. It seemed like the rumors were wrong. However, it was impossible for someone her age to have a cultivation at the peak of the 7th level. No one knew what Li Qianxiao was thinking. All they could see was that his gaze lingered on Yun Ruoyan, as if he were very interested in her. Yun Lan's deep eyes couldn't help but twitch when he saw this. On the other hand, the Yun matriarch looked at Yun Ruoyan uneasily. Had she really entered the hunting grounds? But when he thought about it again, he felt that it was impossible. With Yun Ruoyan's current cultivation, how could she possibly walk out unscathed? "Your Highness, you must have mistaken me for someone else?" The Yun matriarch said. "The hunting grounds are forbidden without the emperor's permission. Anyone who trespasses will be killed. As the family of an official, we naturally know this rule. How could we dare to break in?" "Of course." Li Qianxiao finally shifted his gaze away from Yun Ruoyan. That girl was so strong that even 20 imperial guards weren't a match for her. "Miss Yun, of course." Li Qianxiao reached out to help Yun Ruoyan up. "I was too rash. I didn't scare you, did I?" Yun Ruoyan's head was still lowered. She shook her head slightly, but she didn't say anything. Her hair swayed as she shook her head, making her look even more adorable. Li Qianxiao's smile deepened as he looked at Yun Ruoyan. "Your Highness, please enter." Yun Lan smiled as he glanced meaningfully at Yun Ruoyan. Li Qianxiao and the Yun matriarch walked into the main hall. The crown prince sat at the head of the table, while Yun Lan and the Yun matriarch sat on either side of him. Madame An sat at the very bottom, and the 3 Yun sisters could only stand at the very back. Yun Ruoyan, however, was held by the Yun matriarch's hand. Yun Lan and Li Qianxiao chatted for a while. Not long after, 3 or 4 maids entered the hall, and Madame An stood up and began serving tea to the crown prince. "Your Highness, it's been a long time since you visited. Have a taste of this bayberry soup?" Yun Lan asked Li Qianxiao as he picked up a teacup from the table. A long time ago, when Li Qianxiao had visited the Yun manor, he had unintentionally tasted the bayberry soup and praised it. From then on, Yun Lan had ordered his servants to prepare it every day in case he needed it. Li Qianxiao took a sip of the tea and praised, "It's even better than before." In terms of refreshments, Lady Yun's is still the best. It looks like I'll have to come often in the future if I want to eat my fill. In that case, Your Highness, you must come often. These past 6 months, Ruoyao and Ruoyu have been nagging me about when Brother Crown Prince would come. Madame An smiled. Finally, Your Highness, you're here. Mother, Yun Ruoyu pouted. We didn't. Everyone laughed when they saw her like this. Yun Ruoyan's heart skipped a beat when she saw that even the usually domineering Yun Ruoyu was acting like a little girl. It seemed that her third sister had fallen for Li Qianxiao. As she thought of this, she couldn't help but glance at Yun Ruoyu and Li Qianxiao, meeting Li Qianxiao's smiling, amorous eyes. Having lived 2 lives, Yun Ruoyan had experienced both what she should and shouldn't have experienced, and she immediately understood the meaning behind Li Qianxiao's gaze. She couldn't help but sigh inwardly. She hurriedly turned her gaze away and looked at the ground. Her eyes were looking at her nose and her nose was looking at her heart. Just then Li Qianxiao began. When I came to the Yun Manor as a guest, I spent most of my time playing with Ruoyao and Ruoyu, and I rarely saw you. That's why I didn't know you well enough to offend you at the door. I'm really sorry. Yun Ruoyan continued to look down as if she hadn't heard Li Qianxiao's words. Ruoyan. The Yun matriarch tugged on Yun Ruoyan's arm. The Crown Prince is talking to you. Only then did Yun Ruoyan raise her head to look at Li Qianxiao. It's all right. She then lowered her head again. The Yun matriarch turned to look at Yun Ruoyan, her eyes somewhat confused and dissatisfied. What was wrong with this child today? Why was she lowering her head so much, as if she didn't dare to meet anyone's eyes? She'd wasted so much effort to dress her up, but why was she back to her usual cowardly self at such a critical moment? Where had all the energy she'd had yesterday, when she'd been teaching a maidservant a lesson and dealing with her own sisters? Li Qianxiao misunderstood her, thinking that Yun Ruoyan was just being bashful. He laughed out loud. Ruoyan, you're magnanimous enough to forgive me, but I can't pretend that nothing happened. I'll definitely prepare a gift to apologize to you in the future. Haha. Yunlan also laughed. Your Highness, you're too polite. My daughter has always been ill and she rarely sees guests in the inner courtyard. I hope Your Highness won't be offended. Of course not. Li Qianxiao hurriedly replied, then turned to Yun Ruoyan with concern. I've heard some rumors and I know that Ruoyan's health isn't good. How's your recovery going? She's fine, the Yun matriarch replied. Not only has her body recovered, but her cultivation has also improved greatly. She's already passed Kongming Academy's trial, and all that's left is to wait for the admission notice. Oh. Li Qianxiao's eyes brightened. He hadn't expected that Yun Ruoyan, who looked so weak and frail, would be able to pass Kongming Academy's trial. He had experienced Kongming Academy's trial before, and the imperial family's teachings stated that, like the scions of the royal family, they had to pass the same trial as other scions of the royal family. However, Li Qianxiao had only needed to go through the motions of bringing along a few high-ranked blade masters, pill masters, and summoners with him for a 10-day tour of the imperial territory. However, he had seen for himself just how powerful the beasts within the territory were. On the last night of the trial, they had suddenly encountered a saber-toothed tiger, and it had taken all of their combined strength to kill it. More than half of the warriors he had brought with him had died in the process. I didn't expect Sister Ruoyan to be so pretty, Li Qianxiao praised. You're quite impressive. Yunlan smiled. It's just that I don't often see guests and I'm too reserved. If you don't mind, please come visit me more often and help me take care of this daughter of mine. Help me take care of this daughter of mine. Li Qianxiao's heart skipped a beat when he heard Yunlan's words. When he looked at Yun Ruoyan again, her hair tied up in a loose bun, her resplendent red dress as she stood there, he couldn't hide the joy on his face. Ruoyan, you really don't see many guests, Li Qianxiao commented. Li Qianxiao replied, otherwise, there wouldn't be so many false rumors about my sister. As if suddenly remembering something, he continued, in a few days it'll be summer. Every year at this time, Mother will host a flower viewing banquet. At that time I'll be inviting some of the scions of the aristocratic families into the palace to admire the flowers. In the past I've never seen Ruoyan at banquets, so I'll be sending her an invitation on behalf of my mother. As soon as Li Qianxiao mentioned the flower viewing banquet, everyone's eyes lit up, except for Yun Ruoyan. Although it was called a flower viewing banquet, it was actually a competition for the scions of the aristocratic families. They would compete in cultivation, martial arts, talent, appearance, speech, and clothing. There was nothing that a person couldn't bring out for a competition, and all of these competitions were for the empress. There were 8 princes and 5 princesses in the imperial family, none of whom were officially married. Their marriage partners would be chosen from among the scions of the aristocratic families. All of the scions of the Li Kingdom would try their best to attend the flower viewing banquet. Even if they weren't chosen, it would still be a chance for them to stand out and broaden their horizons. That's great. The Yun matriarch was all smiles and Yun Lan hurriedly agreed. Yun Ruoyan's interest was piqued as well. In her past life, she had always been curious about this famed flower viewing banquet. Although she was the wife-born daughter of the nobility, she hadn't been able to enjoy the privileges that she was entitled to. Since there was a chance to make up for the regrets of his previous life in this life, why not? Thank you, Your Highness. Yun Ruoyan finally smiled at Li Qianxiao. Sister Ruyao, can I attend this flower viewing banquet this year? Yun Ruoyu whispered and Yi Qianying leaned over. There were certain restrictions on who could attend the flower viewing banquet. For example, one couldn't be too young, their cultivation couldn't be too poor, and they had to be the wife-born scion. Last year, Yun Ruoyao had attended the banquet on Yun Ruoyan's behalf. When she returned, she described what she had seen and heard to Yun Ruoyu and Yi Qianying, causing them to drool with envy. As a result, when Li Qianxiao brought up the matter, neither Yi Qianying nor Yun Ruoyu could remain calm. That's hard to say, Yun Ruoyao whispered. Yun Ruoyao whispered, didn't you hear from the crown prince that he'd already given my spot to Ruoyan? I performed well last year so I can go this year. Generally speaking, 2 spots per family is the limit. Doesn't that mean we won't have a chance? Yi Qianying sighed. Yun Ruoyu didn't say anything else, but she glared venomously at Yun Ruoyan. Her spot had clearly been hers, but Yun Ruoyan had stolen it from her. She had to snatch back the spot that belonged to her. Chapter 67. Li Qianxiao hadn't planned on having dinner at the Yun household, but he decided to stay for Yun Ruoyan's sake. After dinner, the Yun matriarch said that she was tired and excused herself from Li Qianxiao, leaving Madame An to take care of her. Because it was early summer, the night air was fresh and clear, and the sky was filled with stars. Li Qianxiao, Yun Lan, Yun Ruoyao, and the others strolled around the back gardens. There was a pavilion, a lake, and all sorts of flowers and plants in the back garden. On the stone path at the corner of the pavilion and in the flower beds, there were glowing moonstones embedded in them. The moonstones illuminated the entire garden, making it look like a fairyland. As soon as they sat down in the middle of the pavilion, a servant came to report to Yun Lan. Yun Lan also excused himself, saying that he had something to take care of and would have to leave for a while. Li Qianxiao, on the other hand, couldn't have asked for more. With Yun Lan around, he had to put on the airs of a crown prince, and it was quite tiring. After Yun Lan left, the Yun sisters no longer held back. They sat by Li Qianxiao's side and began to chat with him. Yun Ruoyan sat by herself on the other side of the pavilion, unable to participate, nor did she want to. Li Qianxiao wanted to sit by Yun Ruoyan's side, but Yun Ruoyu held him back. Li Qianxiao had often visited the Yun household since he was 10. And he often invited Yun Ruoyu and the others to go out with him, so they were quite familiar with each other. As a result, even though Yun Ruoyu was starting to annoy him, he had no choice but to be patient. Crown Prince, why haven't you come to play with us in so long? Yun Ruoyu asked. I went to the Yu Kingdom a while ago and I just got back. What were you doing there? Don't mention it, Li Qianxiao replied angrily. It's all because of that little uncle of mine. Little uncle? Wasn't that Liemo? As soon as Yun Ruoyan heard that name, she immediately perked up her ears. The Slaughtering King. Yun Ruoyu, and Yun Ruoyu called out in unison. Why would someone as powerful as the Slaughtering King cause trouble for you? Yun Ruoyao asked curiously. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but change her sitting position and prepare to listen. Li Qianxiao suddenly turned to Yun Ruoyan. Official Yun has already left, so why are you still so reserved? Everyone looked at Yun Ruoyan at the same time. Seeing that she was sitting upright, they all laughed coldly in their hearts. Pretending to be a lady from a wealthy family, as if the others didn't know that she was ugly. That's right, Yun Ruoyu continued. What's wrong with you today? Why are you so professional and dignified? She said sarcastically, where's the glib tongue from yesterday? Is it because you're wearing the clothes of a lady from a wealthy family that you can't even speak properly? I don't know who they are doing this for. Originally, she didn't want to cause any trouble. All she wanted was for the crown prince to leave as soon as possible so that she could return to her rooms to cultivate. He hadn't expected Yun Ruoyu to be such a troublemaker. Even if he didn't want to slap her in the face, she'd insist on doing so. She thought back to Yun Ruoyu's bashful behavior in the Great Hall that afternoon, and couldn't help but want to provoke her. She began softly, I'm sorry, sister. I'm not as lucky as the rest of you to have known the crown prince for a long time, and we can interact as friends. This is the first time I've been in close contact with the crown prince, and I'm so impressed by his bearing that I'm a little nervous. Ruoyan, there's no need to stand on ceremony. Li Qianxiao immediately stood up. We should have met a long time ago, but it's not too late for us to meet today. I'll be sure to visit you often in the future. As he spoke, he walked around Yun Ruoyu and stood in front of Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan was sitting on the side of the lake, and the moonstones embedded in the pavilion and the lake reflected Yun Ruoyan's silhouette on the surface of the lake. Li Qianxiao stood there in a daze, staring at the lake. Your Highness, why are you still standing? Please have a seat. Yun Ruoyan laughed coldly in her heart, but she kept a smile on her face. As soon as Li Qianxiao's gaze moved away from the beautiful figure on the lake, he immediately met Yun Ruoyan's beautiful smile. His heart felt as though it had been plunged into a warm lake, and he was willing to float along with the waves of the lake. His gaze seemed to be entangled by countless threads, and he didn't want to look away from Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan patted the stone bench beside her, motioning for Li Qianxiao to sit down, and he obediently sat down. Yun Ruoyao tugged on Yun Ruoyu's sleeve, motioning for her to look. Yun Ruoyu bit her lip, her gaze unblinkingly fixed on Li Qianxiao. She didn't understand why her brother, who had always been close to her, wasn't looking at her at all today, but was instead interested in that ugly Yun Ruoyan. He must have been deceived by Yun Ruoyan's pretentious appearance. She had long wanted to rush up to Yun Ruoyan and tear off the gauze covering her birthmark, so that her brother could see her true colors. But because of her father, she didn't dare act rashly. From the corner of her eye, Yun Ruoyan could see that Yun Ruoyu's face was scrunched up like a chrysanthemum, and her hands were clenched tightly by her sides as she struggled to control herself. It seemed that this fire wasn't enough. As a result, she leaned against a pillar and murmured seductively, Brother Crown Prince, I'm tired. Can you send me back to my rooms? Of course. Yun Ruoyan didn't bring any maids with her, and they were about 15 minutes away from her rooms. Li Qianxiao couldn't have been happier to be able to walk with a beauty. Li Qianxiao stood up from the stone bench, and Yun Ruoyan reached out a slender hand to him, looking like a frail, sickly beauty. Li Qianxiao immediately grasped her hand, his tone doting. Sister Run, your body is weak and I shouldn't have asked you to accompany me on a night stroll through the gardens. Yun Ruoyan smiled faintly as she glanced at Yun Ruoyu from the corner of her eye. Seeing that her face had turned purplish red, she knew that it was about time. Brother Crown Prince, please don't say that. It's my weak body that's spoiling your highness's mood. She was helped out of the pavilion by Li Qianxiao, but just as she stepped onto the steps, she suddenly sprained her ankle. Aya! She cried out as her body fell to the side. Li Qianxiao reacted quickly and caught her in his arms. Sister Ruan, are you all right? It's all my fault. Li Qianxiao couldn't help but blame himself, his tone and eyes full of heartache. Enough. Just then Yun Ruoyu, who had been standing in the pavilion, suddenly shouted. Li Qianxiao looked at her in confusion, only to see her rush forward and grab Yun Ruoyan's face. Ah! Yun Ruoyan screamed as she dove into Li Qianxiao's arms. What are you doing? Li Qianxiao grabbed her wrist and shouted angrily. I'm going to tear off her mask. Yun Ruoyu's eyes were red as she stared at Li Qianxiao. Brother Crown Prince, she's an ugly monster. Don't be fooled by her disguise. What disguise? Yun Ruoyan curled up in Li Qianxiao's arms. Sister Ruoyu, I know you like Brother Crown Prince and I'm not trying to steal him from you. I'm just asking you to send me back to my rooms. If you're unwilling, I don't want to. Yun Ruoyan tried to leave Li Qianxiao's embrace, but he hugged her even tighter. Sister Ruan, don't bother with her nonsense. I've spoiled her too much. He flung Yun Ruoyu aside and Yun Ruoyu stumbled into Yun Ruoyao's embrace. Sister Ruan, let's go. Li Qianxiao didn't even look at Yun Ruoyu as he continued to walk out of the pavilion. Yun Ruoyu called out from behind, Yun Ruan, do you dare take off that veil on your face? Do you dare to show your birthmark to brother Crown Prince? You're an ugly monster and no amount of disguise can change that fact. When Li Qianxiao heard her shout, he stopped in his tracks. Yun Ruoyu seemed to see a glimmer of hope as she continued, Crown Prince, aren't you curious as to why she wears a veil and doesn't dare to show her face? Li Qianxiao glanced at Yun Ruoyan in his arms and frowned. Isn't wearing a veil the latest trend among you girls? Not long after Li Qianxiao had picked up the lotus leaf-shaped veil that Yun Ruoyan had thrown away, he had sent someone to investigate the matter, hoping to find out who the veil belonged to. However, the person who had investigated the matter reported that many women from the larger clans liked to wear veils of different shapes and colors on their faces. This was a recent trend. No, it's not like that, Yun Ruoyu hurriedly said. Others wear it for decoration, but Yun Ruoyan wears it to hide the ugly birthmark on her right cheek. If you don't believe me, you can ask Sister Ruyao and Sister Qianying. Li Qianxiao's gaze swept over the two girls, who had been standing silently by the side. Yi Qianying couldn't help but take a step back as if she had something to say. Yun Ruoyao didn't answer the question directly. Won't you know if you take off her veil? I do have a birthmark on my face, Yun Ruoyan suddenly said. Ha, you admit it. Yun Ruoyu clapped her hands. You know you can't hide it anymore, right? But it's healed. Suddenly Yun Ruoyan said something that stunned all three of her sisters. The birthmark on my face has already healed, but it's already healed. What did you say? It's healed. All three sisters exclaimed in unison. Your birthmark has healed? That's right. I ate the antidote that father gave me, so my birthmark is slowly getting better. Although there's still a small mark on it, it'll disappear completely in no time. I don't believe you. None of us will believe you unless you take off your veil, Yun Ruoyu insisted. Yun Ruoyu pressed on. She'd just seen the ugly scar in her grandmother's quarters a few days ago, so how could it have healed so quickly? Impossible. But even if they didn't believe her, someone else did. Yun Ruoyan looked up at Li Qianxiao. Crown Prince, it's not that I don't want to take off my veil, but there's still a mark on my face and I don't want you to see it. If you really want to see it, I'll take it off. As she spoke, she really reached out to take off the veil on her right cheek. Chapter 68. Yun Ruoyu and the others held their breaths as they waited to see Yun Ruoyan's hideous appearance. Yun Ruoyan gazed at Li Qianxiao gently as she slowly removed her veil. No. Just then Li Qianxiao grabbed Yun Ruoyan's hand and said affectionately, Ruoyan, I'm in no hurry. I'm willing to wait and see how perfect you look. Let me send you back now. He didn't turn back as he helped Yun Ruoyan leave, leaving Yun Ruoyu to scream her lungs out. On the other hand, Yun Ruoyan turned around and smiled at Yun Ruoyu. That smile was like a needle, piercing deeply into Yun Ruoyu's heart. Why? She's clearly an ugly monster. Yun Ruoyu held onto a pillar, her fingers digging into it. Crown Prince, why do you trust her and not me? Why? Sister, don't be sad. Yun Ruoyao used a handkerchief to wipe away Yun Ruoyu's tears. This Yun Ruoyan has grandmother's protection, and father treats her in a new light. Even mother doesn't dare to punish her lightly, so don't provoke her. Why? Yun Ruoyu turned to look at Yun Ruoyao angrily. How did that ugly monster manage to climb all over our heads in just a few short months? That's right, why? Yun Ruoyu wasn't the only one troubled by this question. Madame An would send Ling Lan to report on Yun Ruoyan's condition every few days, and every time Ling Lan would reply that the second miss was as usual. As usual? How could that be? How could there be any problems under normal circumstances? Something must have happened that they didn't know about. I also think that she's changed too much from before, Yi Qianying suddenly spoke up. Look at how she seduced the crown prince just now. It doesn't seem like something a girl who hasn't even reached marriageable age would be capable of. Yun Ruoyan's flirtatious display just now was something that even Yi Qianying, who had always been a professional in this field, couldn't help but admit defeat. I won't let this ugly monster do whatever she wants to me. Yun Ruoyu said hatefully as if she wanted to tear Yun Ruoyan apart. The crown prince might not be hers but Yun Ruoyan's. All right. Yun Ruoyao combed Yun Ruoyu's tear-stained hair and comforted her. I'll help you. As she spoke, an imperceptible glint flashed across Yun Ruoyao's eyes. After exiting the garden, Yun Ruoyan pretended to struggle out of Li Qianxiao's embrace. Li Qianxiao felt a little empty and his heart felt a little empty. Ruoyan, are you feeling better? He asked. I'm much better now. Thank you, Your Highness. Yun Ruoyan's tone returned to its previous politeness. There's no one around, so don't call me Your Highness, Ruoyan. Li Qianxiao replied, You can call me Brother Crown Prince like Ruoyu and the others, or you can just call me by my name Li Qianxiao. I wouldn't dare. Yun Ruoyan lowered her head, keeping her distance from Li Qianxiao. Her words were respectful, but her heart was filled with contempt for Li Qianxiao. In her past life she had learned from Paisio that despite his elegant demeanor and gentlemanly demeanor, he was actually quite frivolous and lustful. Every year the Pei family would bring in beauties from all over the Yu kingdom to curry favor with him, and he would never reject any of them. Did you say that the slaughtering king had caused some trouble in the Yu kingdom that required Your Highness to personally deal with it? Yun Ruoyan asked casually. Ah. Li Qianxiao's head hurt. That uncle of mine killed the nephew of the Emperor of Yu over a female slave. The Emperor of Yu couldn't deal with him, so he could only complain to my father. My father sent me to appease him. That man had killed the nephew of the Yu Emperor over a female slave. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. Just then a sudden gust of wind blew through the clear summer night, messing up Yun Ruoyan's hair and lifting up the hem of her dress. For a moment the flowers and trees around them rustled. Li Qianxiao hurriedly reached out to protect Yun Ruoyan. The wind abruptly left and also abruptly stopped. Why would there suddenly be such a strong gust of wind? Li Qianxiao put down Yun Ruoyan's arm, then turned around to ask, Ruoyan, are you all right? Halfway through his words he seemed to be choked by something. His eyes and mouth were wide open, because he saw a face so strange that he had never seen before in his life. Half of it was as beautiful as a fairy's, while the other half was swollen and ugly. These two completely different halves of a person's face. In the stillness of the summer night, after a gust of wind, this strange face appeared before Li Qianxiao's eyes without warning. All he felt was his mind go blank and all the hair on his body stood on end. When he finally reacted he let out a shrill scream. A ghost. Li Qianxiao screamed as he retreated. In his haste he tripped over something and fell on his butt. Your Highness. As soon as Yun Ruoyan started walking toward him, Li Qianxiao screamed again. Don't come any closer, don't come any closer. Yun Ruoyan stopped in her tracks. Get your face. Li Qianxiao closed his eyes, not even daring to look at Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan touched the right side of her face. The phoenix orchid gauze was gone. Your Highness, my face hasn't recovered yet. Yun Ruoyan spoke softly as she walked toward Li Qianxiao. It's already much better than before and it'll only get better in the future. You stop right there. Li Qianxiao's eyes opened a slit, but he only dared to look at Yun Ruoyan's dress. I'm going back to the manor. You can go back yourself. Li Qianxiao didn't care if he was injured or not as he scrambled back down the path he had come from. Yun Ruoyan stared expressionlessly at Li Qianxiao's back until he disappeared around the corner. She turned around and continued walking toward her own rooms, calling out Qiuqiu's name in her mind. Usually Qiuqiu would respond whenever Yun Ruoyan called out to it, but this time it didn't respond. Qiuqiu. Yun Ruoyan called out again. Qiuqiu, mistress. Only then did Qiuqiu respond. Who was it just now? Did you sense it? Yun Ruoyan asked. Qiuqiu, mistress. I was sleeping and didn't notice Qiuqiu, Qiuqiu replied, a little embarrassed. Back in her rooms, Yun Ruoyan dismissed the maids and sat cross-legged on her bed, unable to enter a meditative state. That gust of wind had clearly been intentional, but who could it be and what was the person's goal? Yun Ruoyan frowned as she thought about it. However, when she thought about how the crown prince had been so scared that he'd wet his pants, she couldn't help but laugh. She muttered to herself, Qingchen was right, it really can scare people to the point of peeing their pants. Unable to focus on her cultivation, Yun Ruoyan lay down on her bed. If she were to tell Xianxia about this, no matter how stoic she was, she'd surely be unable to hold back her laughter. Ah! The girl's bell-like laughter could be heard through the tightly shut back window. A dark figure was leaning against it. The wide hood covered his coquettish face, revealing only his chiseled chin and bright red lips with a hint of a smile. In the northwest corner of the Yun Manor, in a secluded courtyard, the third concubine, Qin Jianmei, was kneeling on a prayer mat in the middle of the room. In front of her was a wooden table with a statue of Guanyin. The small room was filled with the fragrance of sandalwood. Yun Ruoyu suddenly pushed open the door and barged in. When Qin Jianmei turned to see her daughter, whom she hadn't seen for a long time, she couldn't help but smile. However, when she saw that Yun Ruoyu's eyes were red and swollen, it was clear that she had been crying. Why are you crying?" Qin Jianmei asked. "Mother." Yun Ruoyu lay in Qin Jianmei's arms and cried. "Mother, I've been bullied." Qin Jianmei patted Yun Ruoyu's back gently. "Daughter, I've often told you that we don't have anyone to rely on in the Yun household. All we have to do is live our lives honestly, mother." Yun Ruoyu abruptly raised her head from Qin Jianmei's arms. Her teary eyes were filled with disappointment and anger as she looked at Qin Jianmei. "Your daughter was bullied and you're telling me this? Are you my biological mother?" As she spoke, she turned to look at the statue of Guanyin on the wooden table and sneered. "Ever since I could remember, mother, all you've done is eat vegetarian and pray to Buddha. When have you ever tried to fight for me? If not for mother's love, I'd probably be worse off than that ugly girl in your cottage." As soon as she said this, she remembered that the ugly girl she'd been referring to was no longer the same as before, and the anger in her heart flared up even more. Are you talking about Ruoyan? What's wrong with her?" Qin Jianmei asked curiously. Yun Ruoyu didn't respond to her question. Instead, she stood up from her mother's embrace and looked at her. "Mother, just stay here and pray to Buddha for the rest of your life." Qin Jianmei called out from behind her, but she didn't turn back. Yun Ruoyu turned and headed for Madame Anne's quarters. Within Madame Anne's quarters, Yun Ruoyao was recounting what had happened at the pavilion in the middle of the lake. "I thought she was an idiot, but I didn't expect her to be even more powerful than her mother." Madame Anne slammed her handkerchief on the table. "She's really up to no good." "Mother." Yun Ruoyao stood behind her. Today she said that her grandfather had given her a pill that could cure her birthmark, and that it would disappear very quickly. If that's really the case, wouldn't the Yun family be hers to rule? "That's impossible." Madame Anne waved her hand. "That's a birthmark brought on by fetal poison. How could it possibly be cured? Most likely it was caused by you." "A birthmark brought on by fetal poison? What does that mean, mother?" Yun Ruoyao asked curiously. "Wasn't she born with that birthmark?" Let's not talk about that." Realizing that she had let the cat out of the bag, Madame Anne tried to change the subject. Just then Xianxia, who had been waiting outside, opened the curtains and whispered, "Madame Miss Yun, the third miss is here." Then Yun Ruoyu angrily lifted the curtain and walked in. She called out to her mother, and a large tear rolled down her cheek uncontrollably. "Oh, don't cry anymore." Madame Anne walked over and wiped her tears with her handkerchief. "Your eldest sister has already told me what happened. This Yun Ruoyan is really going against the heavens. She even dared to seduce the crown prince." "Mother!" Yun Ruoyu grabbed Madame Anne's sleeve. "Mother, you have to punish that slut for me. Things aren't like before." Madame Anne patted her head and sighed. "That girl used to be the sole wife-born daughter of the crown prince, but neither the old master nor the old madam liked her, so we could suppress her as we pleased. Now, however, the old master and the old madam are re-evaluating her. Let alone seduce the crown prince, it's even possible that she'll one day climb onto the crown prince's bed and enter his manor." "Oh no!" Yun Ruoyu exclaimed. "The crown prince can marry anyone but her. No matter what, I can't let her climb onto my head. Mother, you have to help me. I'll do anything you want." Madame Anne frowned as she looked at Yun Ruoyu. "As long as you can bring her down, you'll really be willing to do anything?" "Yes." Yun Ruoyu pursed her lips and nodded heavily. Madame Anne turned back to look at Yun Ruoyao, and the two of them exchanged a glance. After 2 days of peace and quiet, one afternoon the weather was a little hot and humid. Yun Ruoyan had just finished her cultivation and was about to take a bath when Madame Anne's maid Hongyu came to pass on a message that Madame Anne was cooling off in the middle of the lake with the young ladies, and that Yun Ruoyu should join them for tea. Yun Ruoyan was about to refuse without hesitation, but Hongyu said that the old madam would be joining them in a while. It had been a few days since Yun Ruoyan had gone to her quarters to pay her respects, so she agreed. After a simple bath and a change of clothes, Yun Ruoyan put on a thin jade-green robe and a green veil over her face, and she walked toward the pavilion in the middle of the lake. In the back garden, Yun Ruoyan could see Madame and Yun Ruoyao and Yun Ruoyu sitting in the pavilion. Yi Qianying had been summoned back to the Manor for some reason, and she hadn't been seen in days. When Yun Ruoyan didn't see her grandmother, she sneered inwardly and walked toward the pavilion. Chapter 69. Ruoyan, you're here. Madame Anne smiled at Yun Ruoyan. Come, have a seat. I heard that grandmother was coming, so I came to join in the fun. Isn't grandmother here yet? Yun Ruoyan smiled. Oh, grandmother was going to come at first, but as soon as she stepped out of her rooms, she felt dizzy from the heat, so she went back. Oh, is that so? Yun Ruoyan's smile was still as bright as a flower. Mother, it's such a hot and humid day and there's no wind at all. Why did you decide to stay here? Ah. Madame Anne sighed. It's all because of Ruoyu. She glanced at Yun Ruoyu, who had been keeping her head down the entire time. I heard from the Yun sisters that Ruoyu made you unhappy that night when the crown prince was a guest. These past few days she's been pestering me to find an opportunity to resolve the enmity between the two of you. Madame Anne handed a cup of herbal tea to Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan held it in her hands for a moment before placing it back on the stone table. We're all sisters, so there's no need to take offense. She smiled faintly. That's because you're magnanimous, but how can you not apologize for offending the elder sister? Madame Anne's tone turned serious. The Yun family has always been strict in its conduct. This is the rule. As soon as Madame Anne finished speaking, Yun Ruoyu stood up and walked up to Yun Ruoyan. Sister, I was too impulsive that night and I almost hurt you. As she spoke, she took a porcelain teacup from a nearby maid and handed it to Yun Ruoyan. This is a candied red bayberry soup that Ruoyu specially made for you. If you really don't blame me, please have a sip. As she spoke, she looked at the teacup in her hand. On the surface of the teacup was a pure white lotus flower, with a bright red dragonfly perched on its petals. Yun Ruoyu couldn't help but think back to that night, when Madame Anne had placed a similar bright red bottle in her hand. This is a poison produced in the Wu Kingdom to the west, and it's called red dust. If eaten, it would not immediately kill the person, but the poison would slowly seep into the person's internal organs. Within 20 hours, it will overflow the surface of the body. It will become red, swollen, itchy, and slowly cause the whole body to fester. At most, it will take half a month before you die like a pile of mud. After hearing Madame Anne's introduction, Yun Ruoyu immediately felt the red bottle in her hand heat up, burning her palm. The birthmark on that girl's face had festered before. Even if it's healed now, it'll still leave a scar. It's the most vulnerable and sensitive part of her skin. Madame Anne was unperturbed. Once the poison takes effect, it will definitely spread from the birthmark on her face. When that happens, even she herself will think that there's something wrong with her birthmark, and no one will be able to find out. So you don't have to worry. Just remember, this medicine is extremely toxic. Once it comes into contact with your body, it will leave a scar. Madame Anne emphasized. Ruoyan, if you don't drink it, it means that you won't forgive me. Seeing that Yun Ruoyan had no intention of taking the teacup, Madame Anne sighed. If that's the case, I'll have no choice but to punish her according to the rules of the household, so as to appease your anger. Yun Ruoyan smiled and raised her hand, but she still didn't take the teacup. Instead, she ran her fingers through her hair and said nonchalantly, Then I'll punish her. Madame Anne hadn't expected such a response from her, and she didn't know how to respond. Mother, if there's nothing else, I'll take my leave now. Yun Ruoyan stood up to leave. Yun Ruoyu panicked. It had taken her a great deal of determination to do this. Moreover, the flower viewing party was about to begin. If she missed this opportunity, she wouldn't have another. Sister Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyu hurriedly chased after Yun Ruoyan, her teacup in hand. But Yun Ruoyan seemed to know that she would chase after her. Suddenly she turned around, and the thin gauze she was wearing fluttered in the air, emitting a faint ripple of spiritual energy. Yunruoyu suddenly felt a gust of wind blow past her face, and the teacup in her hand slipped out of her grasp and flipped over her body. The next moment the cold, sticky soup splashed onto Yunruoyu's neck. Yunruoyu let out a startled scream, echoing far and wide in the stifling heat of the afternoon. The Yun matriarch sat in a palanquin, being carried through the gates of the garden. She heard the mournful cry and couldn't help but frown at Peony, who was holding an umbrella for her. Just a moment ago the Yun matriarch had woken up from her afternoon nap, and Peony had gone to her courtyard to say that her mistress wanted to invite her grandmother to the lakeside pavilion in the back garden to watch a play. The Yun matriarch didn't ask any questions and simply followed her. She hadn't expected to hear the play before she'd seen it. Mother, help me wipe it off. Sticking to my skin. Yunruoyu jumped up and down, crying and screaming as she ran toward Madame Anne. Don't come over. Madame Anne's face paled as she hurriedly dodged. Sister, save me. I don't want a scar. Yunruoyu ran toward Yunruoyao again. No, don't come over. Yunruoyao was also being chased by Yunruoyu, running in circles around the pavilion. Second miss, what's wrong? The crowd of maids who didn't know what was going on were also frightened by the scene. In an instant the pavilion was filled with chaos. What's going on? The Yun matriarch hadn't seen such a scene in her own backyard for many years, and she couldn't help but yell angrily. She didn't usually speak loudly, but this time her voice was very loud. Everyone in the pavilion was stunned. Grandmother, save me. Yunruoyu looked at the Yun matriarch as if she had seen a life-saving straw, and she turned and ran toward her grandmother. With her hands clasped behind her back, Yunruoyan appeared in front of her in 2 steps, raised her foot and kicked her in the chest. Yunruoyu felt a strong force on her chest, but she didn't feel any pain. Instead her body flew up involuntarily. Plop. In the next instant her entire body fell into the lake. In the pavilion the Yun matriarch sat on a stone bench, while Yunruoyu knelt on the ground, her clothes drenched. Grandmother, please call a doctor to save me. Yunruoyu felt an unbearable itch on her chest where the soup had touched her, and she couldn't help but scratch at it. Yunruoyu's clothes were drenched, her hair was disheveled, and she kept scratching at her chest. The Yun matriarch couldn't bear to see her in such a state, so she ordered Xiaolon to find a doctor. She then turned to Madame Anne and demanded coldly, "Tell me what's going on?" "Mother, I don't know either," Madame Anne said anxiously and confusedly. She had only called for her 2 daughters because she wanted to resolve the conflict between them, and she didn't know what was going on either. In a few sentences she had completely disregarded herself. Yunruoyu's chest was numb, and her heart was filled with fear. She looked at her mother, who had always doted on her, with teary eyes, but she didn't dare expose her. She had always been stubborn, and her mother hadn't been able to protect her. She had always lived under Madame Anne's protection. She didn't dare imagine how she would survive in the Yun family without Madame Anne's protection or Yunruoyao's support. "Ryu, tell me what's going on." The Yun matriarch shouted at Yunruoyu. Yunruoyu, on the other hand, was shivering on the floor, unable to speak. "Sister Ruoyu, just admit it." Yunruoyao suddenly spoke up. "Grandmother," Ruoyu was just muddle-headed for a moment. "Please spare her." Yunruoyu turned to look at her sister, all the emotions in her heart turning into tears. However, she still gritted her teeth and didn't say a word. "Alright, if she won't talk, you talk," the Yun matriarch said to Yunruoyao. Yunruoyao glanced at Yunruoyu, steeled her heart and slowly began. "Yesterday Sister Ruoyu came looking for me, saying that she'd found something interesting and wanted to show me." She paused. "What was it?" the Yun matriarch asked. "It was a red bottle, and she said that it contained a medicinal powder that would make one's body itch," Yunruoyao replied. "I didn't expect that she'd put the powder in her soup either. I'm sure she was just trying to play a prank on you." "Was that so? A medicinal powder that makes one's body itch?" Yunruoyan smiled coldly. "Where's that medicinal powder now? Sister Ruoyu, can you show it to me?" "No more." Yunruoyu raised her head and stammered, "There wasn't much to begin with, and it's all been used up." Yunruoyu sneered inwardly. She'd reacted quite quickly, leaving her with no evidence. Grandmother, I know I was wrong. Yun Ruoyu cried as she knelt before the Yun matriarch. I won't dare to play a prank on you again. There's a next time. The Yun matriarch's face was ashen. It looks like I've really been too lenient with you all. How dare you drug your own sister? This time it was a prank, but next time, it'll be a lethal one. I wouldn't dare. Yun Ruoyu crawled on the floor, her hands scratching at her neck. In a few moments her slender neck was covered in bloody scratches. Mother, Ruoyu's still young, Madam An pleaded. Madam An pleaded, she's already suffered the consequences of her own actions. Please calm down and let her off this time. It's all because you've spoiled her. The Yun matriarch glanced at Madam An. She wasn't trying to harm me but Ruoyan. Go ask Ruoyan if she's willing to forgive her. Ruoyu, hurry up and beg your sister for mercy. Madam An shouted at Yun Ruoyu. Although Yun Ruoyu was extremely unwilling, she still turned around and knelt before Yun Ruoyan. Sister, I'm still young and mischievous, so please forgive me. Yun Ruoyan smiled faintly, her gaze sweeping across Madam An and Yun Ruoyao. This isn't the first time you've played a prank on me like this, has it? Every time I let you off, you'll think that I'm easy to bully. She turned to the Yun matriarch. Grandmother, don't blame me for being petty, but the Yun family has strict rules. If I let you off so easily, what's the point of talking about rules? Mother, don't you agree? Yun Ruoyan turned back to Madam An couldn't help but frown. Those were her exact words, and now that Yun Ruoyan had thrown them back at her, she naturally couldn't slap herself in the face. Ruoyu may have gone too far this time, but she's still young. I hope you won't hurt her, Mother. Yun Ruoyan glanced at Yun Ruoyu. Seeing the bloody marks on her neck, she felt that the wounds weren't light at all. Who asked me to be the elder sister? She sighed before turning to the Yun matriarch. I'll punish Ruoyu with confinement in her own courtyard. The Yun matriarch patted Yun Ruoyan's hand, feeling that this punishment couldn't be any lighter. All right, I'll do as you say. She looked at Yun Ruoyan with a gratified gaze. I'll let you decide the length of confinement. You can release her when you've truly calmed down. Yun Ruoyu's hand that was scratching her neck suddenly stopped. If Yun Ruoyan didn't calm down, would she be confined for the rest of her life? Just as she was about to speak, Madam An glared at her, forcing her to close her mouth. Grandmother, it's too hot here. Let me send you back to your quarters. Yun Ruoyan supported the Yun matriarch obediently. Right, let's go back. The Yun matriarch smiled. You haven't been to my place for many days. Do you like the fruits I had Xiaolon bring you? I like them very much, and I was even thinking of asking for some more from you, Grandmother. Alright, I have a lot of them. You can have as much as you want. The two of them walked out of the pavilion together. Yun Ruoyan felt a few dagger-like gazes on her back, and she straightened her back even more. You want to harm me? You're all too young. In this lifetime only I, Yun Ruoyan, am capable of harming others. Chapter 70. In the blink of an eye, it was already June and the weather was getting hotter and hotter. The phoenix orchids, on the other hand, were blooming more and more beautifully, their pink petals turning crimson. Large patches of petals looked like a blood-stained sunset, and no one dared to look at them directly. In the middle of June, it had rained for many days, and the stifling heat of the capital finally cooled off a little. One day Yun Ruoyan was enjoying the cool air at her grandmother's residence when her father came in to inform her that the Empress's flower viewing party was to be held the following night. He handed a golden invitation to Yun Ruoyan. As soon as Yun Ruoyan opened the invitation, the words Yun Ruoyan, daughter of the Yun family, appeared before her eyes. Yun Ruoyan's eyes flashed with suspicion. She had thought that Li Qianxiao wouldn't invite her to the flower viewing party after being frightened by her that night. But the invitation had still come. Just after noon the next day, Peony was busy helping Yun Ruoyan dress up. She was still wearing the formal dress that the Yun matriarch had prepared for her. It was an open-necked green silk gown, embroidered with colorful butterflies and colorful flower petals with gold and silver threads. When Yun Ruoyan wore it, she looked dignified and demure but also beautiful and adorable. Because she wasn't of marriageable age, her hair was still tied up loosely at the back. On her right side was a small gold-threaded flower, and on her left was a jade-green ornament inlaid with gold. As she looked around, the glass swayed and a ray of resplendent light shone on her creamy left cheek. Miss, What kind of veil are you going to wear today? Peony asked. Although Xilan looked clumsy, she was actually quite the craftsman. She had made many colorful veils for Yun Ruoyan, and none of them were inferior to Lin Qingqian's. Yun Ruoyan glanced at the veils spread out on the table and suddenly thought back to the night when the crown prince had been so scared that he had wet his pants. She couldn't help but smile as she picked up the phoenix petal veil and put it on. In the evening, Yun Ruoyan and Yun Ruyao rode together in a carriage toward the imperial palace. The two of them had only exchanged a few polite words when they met in the auspicious swell garden. After that, they hadn't spoken a word. Although Yun Ruyao was looking out the window, she couldn't help but glance at Yun Ruoyan from the corner of her eyes. More accurately, she was looking at the gold-studded hair ornament on Yun Ruoyan's head. At this time last year she had seen this buyao at her grandmother's place and had begged her mother to get it for her. Madame N, however, said that it was part of the Yun matriarch's dowry, and that it was to be passed on to the Yun family's wife-born daughter. Once she became the wife-born daughter of the Yun family, it would naturally belong to her. At that time, both mother and daughter felt that the position of the first wife's daughter would soon be theirs. But today, a year later, that golden ornament was shining brightly, firmly inserted into Yun Ruoyan's head. Sister, if you're tired you can rest for a while, Yun Ruoyan suddenly suggested. Sister took an afternoon nap so I don't feel tired. Yun Ruyao smiled awkwardly, but in her heart she was somewhat shocked. She turned her gaze away and hid her hatred even deeper. At dusk, the carriage finally stopped at the eastern gate of the palace. There were 4 gates to the Li Kingdom's palace. The northern gate was the main gate, and it was used by the nobles and officials to enter and exit the palace. The western and southern gates were used by palace maids and eunuchs, while the eastern gate was used by the female members of the royal family. By this time, there were already quite a few carriages waiting in front of the eastern gate, all of them waiting to enter the palace for the flower viewing party. Yun Ruyao notified Yun Ruoyan that she was on her way, then left the carriage to catch up with the other scions of the noble families. Yun Ruoyan sat in the carriage for a while longer. As soon as she stepped out, she saw Pei Zio walking toward her, wearing a white robe and a white jade crown. His handsome face was full of smiles. Sister Ruoyan, you're here. It took me a while to find you. He had arrived early in the morning and had already searched the entire area. When he saw the Yun family's carriage from afar, he hurriedly walked over. Coincidentally, he saw Yun Ruoyan open the curtains to alight from the carriage. Once he saw her, he couldn't take his eyes off her. Oh! Yun Ruoyan raised an eyebrow. Young Master Pei, are you here to give me a high-grade spiritual pill, or have you finished forging the tiger canine arrowheads? Pei Zio paused, his face a little embarrassed. Sister Ruoyan, you know how precious spiritual pills are. I told my father about them, but he didn't agree. As for the tiger canine arrowheads, they're already in the process of being forged. Yun Ruoyan laughed. Oh, so young Master Pei doesn't keep his word. Then why did you agree so readily back then? Were you joking with me? Pei Zio's face began to turn red. Other than the spiritual pill, as long as it's within my means, I'm willing to do it for you. Really? Yun Ruoyan's face was still plastered with a teasing smile, but it was so beautiful that it was impossible to dislike her. Yes, really? Good. Yun Ruoyan looked at Pei Zio. From now on, other than giving me the spiritual pill and the tiger canine arrowheads, please stay as far away from me as you can. I don't want to see you. Pei Zio's warm heart felt as if it had been thrown into an ice house, and it kept sinking. He really couldn't understand why Yun Ruoyan hated him so much. In terms of status, although the Peis weren't as prominent as the Yun family under Pei Yingxiong's management, the Pei's status had only grown higher and higher. Yun Ruoyan was the eldest daughter of the Yun family, while he was the only son. As long as she married him, she would inherit the entire Pei family, and she wouldn't have to worry about sibling rivalry. In terms of appearance, he was confident that he was top-notch, and no matter how beautiful Yun Ruoyan was, she couldn't erase the mark beneath her gaudy veil. What right did she have to look down on him? What right did she have to trample all over his love and care? As he thought of this, he couldn't help but clench his fists tightly, a mixture of love and hate for Yun Ruoyan welling up in his heart. Yun Ruoyan couldn't be bothered with Pei Zio's emotional changes, and she didn't care at all. To someone who would die at her hands sooner or later, any other emotion would be a waste. Brother Zhou, so you're here. I've been looking for you for so long. Just then a girl's voice rang out, one that she hadn't heard in a long time. She couldn't help but turn toward the source of the voice. Xianxia, dressed in a gorgeous formal dress, was gracefully walking towards him, her pair of watery eyes staring straight at Pei Zhou, who was standing beside her. Young Master Pei, your dear sister is here, so I won't disturb the two of you any longer. Yun Ruoyan smiled faintly as she walked toward the eastern gate. Sister Ruoyan. Xianxia quickly blocked Yun Ruoyan's path. Why did you leave as soon as you saw me? Are you still angry at me for what happened last time? As she approached, Yun Ruoyan smelled a faint floral fragrance, tinged with a hint of sweetness that was rather alluring. Who knew how many bees and butterflies would be drawn to her tonight? Every year during the flower viewing banquet, the princes and princesses weren't necessarily matched up with one another. However, there were quite a few that the scions of the nobility were interested in. Although Xianxia's heart was in love with Pei Zhou, how could she let go of such an opportunity to showcase herself? Seeing Xianxia staring at her with her large watery eyes, Yun Ruoyan replied coolly, "Why would I blame you? Weren't you also kept in the dark by Xiang last time? If I want to blame someone, I can only blame Xiang for eating a bear's gall and being blind enough to harm anyone." Sister, you're right. Now that Xiang has been dealt with, I'm sure you've calmed down, Xianxia replied without a change in expression. Sister Xianxia, why are you here? Pei Zhou walked over and asked curiously. He hadn't seen Xianxia in a long time, and as far as he knew, she wasn't qualified to attend the banquet. Xianxia smiled brightly as she looked at Pei Zhou. My second uncle sent me an invitation. Although Xianxia was the eldest son of the Yi family, both her parents had passed away when she was young. The Yun matriarch, afraid that she would be ostracized by the Yi family, had raised her by her side from a young age, and the Yi family had almost forgotten about her existence. However, of the two daughters of the current head of the Yi family, one was ugly and the other useless, so Xianxia had no choice but to attend the banquet. Just then, a eunuch walked out from the eastern gate and announced that the flower viewing banquet was about to begin, and that the scions and misses of the nobility should enter the palace as soon as possible. Yun Ruoyan followed a procession of more than 30 people, led by palace maids and eunuchs, through the tall eastern gate and into the palace of the Li Kingdom, a place she hadn't visited in her past life. At this moment, night had already fallen. The tall and majestic palace appeared even more majestic and solemn in the misty night. Some of the scions of the nobility had attended the flower viewing banquet last year, and those who hadn't before couldn't help but whisper among themselves. As they passed by a stone statue that was at least 30 feet tall, Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but stop. It was a statue of a qilin, its entire body wrapped in flames. Its hind feet were planted firmly on the ground, and its forepaws were raised high as if it were about to take flight. Yun Ruoyan raised her head, her gaze landing on the statue's enormous head. Its fangs were protruding, and its two large eyes were looking up into the sky, as if it really were about to leap into the heavens at any moment. Just looking at it made Yun Ruoyan's heart flutter, and she couldn't help but fall into a daze. That's a flame qilin. Qiuqiu's voice rang out in Yun Ruoyan's mind, its tone full of yearning. A flame qilin. Isn't this the legendary sacred beast that can swallow the sun and the moon? Yun Ruoyan exclaimed. Which family's young miss is that? Don't you know the rules? Hurry up and catch up. A shrill voice suddenly rang out. Yun Ruoyan turned around to see a white-faced, middle-aged man dressed in a eunuch's robe standing not too far away, scolding her. The procession of more than 30 people had already walked far away. Eunuch, how she's my friend. Just then a familiar male voice rang out from behind Yun Ruoyan. Before Yun Ruoyan could turn around, a familiar black-robed figure appeared in front of her. Wow! Li Qianhan stood in front of Yun Ruoyan, his eyes and mouth wide open in an exaggerated manner. Who would have thought that an ugly girl would transform into a phoenix in just a few days? Ha! Yun Ruoyan was amused by his expression. Third prince, you haven't changed at all. Even in your own home you're still acting so sneakily. Eunuch Hao stood behind the two of them. Seeing that the two of them were actually reminiscing about old times, he couldn't help but feel anxious. He bowed and said, Third prince, miss, if you don't leave now, it'll be past time for the flower viewing party. Li Qianhan suddenly grabbed Yun Ruoyan's hand and said to the white-faced eunuch, Eunuch Hao, please slow down. I'll be leaving with my friend first. Yun Ruoyan felt a gust of wind beneath her feet, and then her entire body was lifted into the air. She could hear the wind howling by her ears, and the pavilions on both sides of her flew backward. Miss Yun. Li Qianhan turned around. My uncle's here tonight and I'm sure he'll be happy to see you. What did you say? Yun Ruoyan didn't hear him clearly. Chapter 71. Once a blade master reached 7th rank, they would be able to learn how to soar through the air, but the requirements to do so were extremely stringent. In addition to a sword riding technique, one would also need a high-grade spiritual sword that could be cultivated to the point of becoming one with the sword. Only then would one be able to soar through the air. In order to master the art of flying swords, talent and wealth were both indispensable. As a result, there were quite a few blade masters on the Qinyuan continent who could reach 7th rank and above, but those who knew how to soar through the air were few and far between. What's more, the fabled ability to soar through the air would allow one to travel 1,000 miles in a single day. Li Qianhan and Yun Ruoyan soared into the air, arriving at the rear gardens of the imperial palace before the rest of the procession. From afar, Yun Ruoyan could see a patch of red clouds floating on the horizon, the bright red sun slowly disappearing into the clouds. She couldn't help but exclaim in awe. It's so beautiful. Of course. Li Qianhan let go of Yun Ruoyan's hand, and the two of them had already landed in a garden filled with flowers. Other than the Minghuang Mountain, you can only see such a large patch of phoenix orchids in the imperial palace and the summer gardens. Only then did Yun Ruoyan realize that the red clouds in the sky were actually a forest of phoenix orchids. Let's go, I'll take you to the garden where the flower viewing party will be held. Li Qianhan quickly brought Yun Ruoyan to the garden. By then, all of the scions had already entered the garden and taken their seats. The moonstones embedded in the floorboards glowed brighter and brighter, illuminating the entire garden as if it were a fairyland. Yun Ruoyan turned around, but Li Qianhan was nowhere to be seen. He had disappeared again. Sister Ruoyan, sit here, Yi Qianying called out to Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan looked around and saw that all of the seats in the garden were already occupied. Yun Ruoya was sitting next to a girl whose name she didn't recognize, and the two of them were chatting happily. Only the seat next to Yi Qianying was empty and Pei Zia was sitting right next to it. Yun Ruoyan felt a headache coming on. Is the heavens doing this on purpose? If I don't find an opportunity to completely dispel this curse, I really won't be able to do it. As she sat down, she noticed an exquisite bouquet of multicolored flowers by the corner of the table. She saw that the other tables also had it, so she picked it up and played with it. As she played with it, she glanced at the disciples sitting across from her. Most of them were unfamiliar faces. Only a few of them had some impression of him since he had met them in the secret realm. Yi Qianying glanced at Yun Ruoyan from the corner of her eye, a sinister glint flashing across her beautiful eyes. This multicolored bouquet wasn't special. There was one at the corner of every table. It could be considered an ingenious decoration. However, Yun Ruoyan's bouquet contained a purple flower bud that no one else possessed. Yi Qianying had discovered this flower while she was concocting magical beast powder. It was colorless and odorless, but once it came into contact with the fragrance of another flower, it would release a strong aphrodisiac toxin. There was a small magical beast called Surge that relied on the fragrance of these two flowers to attract female beasts for mating. Sister, look at this flower. It's so pretty. I don't even have one here. Just as Yun Ruoyan was daydreaming, a white arm suddenly appeared in front of her. Yi Qianying leaned forward and stretched out her arm as if reaching for something. Her loose sleeve slid down, revealing her snow-white arm, and a sweet floral fragrance wafted toward Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan subconsciously held her breath, but she still managed to inhale the fragrance. Yi Qianying held the purple flower in her hand, as if she had never seen such a beautiful flower before. I've never seen such a beautiful flower before. Sister, why don't you give it to me? Yun Ruoyan's instincts told her that something was amiss, but she didn't respond. Yi Qianying thanked her and took the flower away. Right at that moment, the garden that had been filled with laughter and chatter suddenly fell silent. Someone whispered, "It's the Slaughtering King. The Slaughtering King is here." Everyone raised their heads to look at the entrance of the garden. Out of the corner of her eye, Yun Ruian noticed a small purple petal that had fallen out of the bouquet in front of her. She picked it up silently, then placed it into Yi Qianying's teacup. "Sister, look, it's the Slaughtering King." Yi Qianying called out to Yun Ruian excitedly, but her eyes were glued to Li Mo. Only then did Yun Ruian raise her head. Two people had entered, Li Mo and Li Qianhan, one in front of the other, both dressed in black robes. Li Qianhan wore a violet gold crown on his head and a jade-colored belt. Li Mo, on the other hand, wore a simple black robe without any accessories. His long ink-black hair casually draped over his shoulders, and a third of his chiseled face was hidden behind his ink-black hair. What made him even more conspicuous was a pair of eyes so dark that they gleamed. Those eyes reminded Yun Ruian of the magical beasts she had encountered in the imperial territory, and she couldn't help but shiver. Yun Ruian wasn't the only one who felt the chill. The entire garden seemed to grow colder as a result of Li Mo's arrival. Almost everyone here had grown up listening to the legends of the Slaughtering King. And this person, shrouded in darkness, had suddenly appeared in front of everyone. For a moment, not even the sound of breathing could be heard. Noticing Yun Ruian's gaze, Li Qianhan met her gaze and winked mischievously, successfully drawing everyone's attention to Yun Ruian. "Who's that person?" The third prince actually winked at her. It was unknown who said this. Someone else whispered, "I don't know. She looks a little unfamiliar, but she's so pretty. She must be the young miss of a large family." "Of course. Look at her veil made from a phoenix orchid. I went to so many clothing stores but I couldn't find one like that, so I had to settle for a peach one." Yi Qianying puffed out her chest and announced proudly, "This is my second cousin, the wife-born daughter of the Yun family, Yun Ruan." "Oh, she's the wife-born daughter of the Yun family. Didn't they say that the wife-born daughter of the Yun family was ugly? How could she be so pretty?" "That's right, it looks like the rumors aren't true. Yun Ruoyan." Suddenly, the girl sitting next to Yun Ruian stood up. "I heard that your cultivation has improved, and today, I'd like to challenge you to a duel in front of the Slaughtering King." Yun Ruian paused. She saw that the girl was dressed in a dress that was far more complicated than her own, and she looked somewhat familiar, but she couldn't remember where she'd seen her before. "Do you dare accept my challenge?" The girl challenged again, seeing that Yun Ruian didn't respond. Li Mo was already seated at his seat, sipping on a cup of wine as if he were watching a show unfold. Yun Ruian smiled and stood up. "Miss, how would you like to duel?" Yun Ruian had long since heard of the various duels that took place during the flower viewing party. Usually, the duels would only begin after the emperor and empress arrived, but Li Mo's arrival had brought the duel forward. Because the girls were all dressed in formal attire, it wasn't appropriate for them to fight. The two of them walked to an empty field, holding a willow branch that had been broken off from a tree. Li Qianhan stood between them with a handful of flower petals in his hand, then sprinkled them into the air. The two of them had to infuse spiritual energy into the willow branch to harden it, then use the branch to stab the falling petals. Whoever managed to stab the most petals would be the victor. The originally soft willow branch in Yun Ruian's hand instantly straightened as she infused it with spiritual energy. Just as she was about to stab the petals, a strange heat suddenly surged out of her body. That heat spread rapidly and her entire body felt hot and dry. She couldn't focus and the willow branch in her hand became soft once more. Yun Ruian suddenly turned to look at Yi Qianying, who was sipping tea and smiling at Yun Ruian. The girl's cultivation clearly wasn't weak, and the willow branch pierced through more than a dozen petals in an instant, eliciting cheers from the crowd. "I admit defeat," Yun Ruian suddenly exclaimed. She threw the willow branch in her hand away and turned to leave without another word. "Hey!" The girl didn't want to give up. "You're not going to give up so easily." Yun Ruoyan, who had already turned away, felt a gust of wind behind her. She tilted her head and the willow branch brushed past her face. "Ah!" Low gasps could be heard from the surroundings. "Her face, it's so scary. It looks like the rumors are true. The daughter of the Yun family really is ugly. She's still that ugly girl from before." The girl took the phoenix petal veil from the willow branch and held it out to Yun Ruian. Come and take it. Yun Ruoyan didn't seem to hear the jeers around her, nor did she care about the girl's provocation. She didn't even turn her head. If you like it, I'll give it to you. Then, under the crowd's gaze, she walked back down the path she had come from. She staggered as she walked, the fire in her body burning her so dry that her mouth was dry. As someone who had lived 2 lives, how could she not know what this feeling meant? But her mind was becoming more and more hazy. She bit the tip of her tongue. The sharp pain and the sweet taste of blood in her mouth made her a little more clear-headed, but not for long. What should I do? What should I do? What's wrong with you? Just then a hand landed on Yun Ruoyan's shoulder. Like a drowning person suddenly grabbing onto a piece of driftwood, Yun Ruoyan turned and threw herself into that person's embrace. You've been poisoned. Li Mo frowned as he felt the heat in his arms. It's aphrodisiac. Yun Ruoyan felt her limbs go numb, and her entire body was in an indescribable discomfort. It's so uncomfortable, there's a fire, roasting me hot. She felt as if her body was about to melt. She desperately needed a piece of ice or a basin of water to extinguish the fire. Quick, give me water. Yun Ruoyan was like a tender vine, desperately wrapping herself around Li Mo's tall body. Her face was flushed and her hair was disheveled. Her robes were open, revealing her rosy skin, like the petals of a phoenix tree. Li Mo couldn't help but raise an eyebrow as he whispered into Yun Ruoyan's ear, "This isn't a good place to extinguish the fire." His long arm wrapped around Yun Ruoyan's slender waist and he formed a sword seal. A green light flashed beneath his feet and he lifted Yun Ruoyan into the air. In a daze, Yun Ruoyan felt as if she had floated up into the clouds, and the fire in her heart had also reached the clouds. Li Mo looked down at Yun Ruoyan's reddening face and his brows furrowed. Now wasn't the time to have her. He had to find the antidote as soon as possible. Yun Ruoyan's 2 arms, however, had turned into vines that slithered around Li Mo's body. Li Mo's voice was cold. If you keep being so naughty, I won't be able to control myself and we'll both fall. As he spoke, his cold breath landed on Yun Ruoyan's face. Desperate to extinguish the fire, Yun Ruoyan clung onto his body. This was the first time that the slaughtering king had been forcefully kissed. Let go. Li Mo had to fly on his sword, but he also had to make sure that Yun Ruoyan didn't fall. For a moment he couldn't free himself from Yun Ruoyan's grasp. Yun Ruoyan's nimble hands had already taken off her black robe, and she tossed it casually into the phoenix orchard beneath her feet like a kite with its string cut. Li Mo could no longer focus on flying on his sword, and the 2 of them floated down from the sky, entangled in each other's arms. Coincidentally, they landed in a lake in the middle of the orchard, creating a huge splash. In the lake, the 2 of them were entangled like 2 fish with their necks intertwined. The surging lake water splashed against Yun Ruoyan's face, and the fake birthmark on her right cheek faded bit by bit. Her face, even more perfect than a phoenix petal, was slowly revealed to Li Mo. Li Mo's eyes slowly widened, and his inky black pupils began to take on a mysterious, icy blue hue. Chapter 72. In the Phoenix Orchid Forest, in the lake that was filled with petals, Yun Ruoyan slowly removed her disguise. She was like the most beautiful crystal in the world, but because it had been obscured by dust and dirt, she had been treated as an ugly stone by the ignorant world and abandoned in a corner. But one day, when she was cleansed and revealed her true appearance, she would surely amaze the world. Before she could amaze the world, she would first amaze Li Mo. Li Mo gazed at Yun Ruoyan's cleansed face. His icy blue eyes seemed to be filled with a sky full of stars, and Yun Ruoyan was the brightest of them all. I only thought you smelled good, but I didn't expect you to be so pretty. Li Mo's magnetic voice was low and hoarse. I thought you were just a useful object, but I didn't expect you to be such a perfect work of art. That man's unique voice was like an elongated malt candy, sweet but not greasy, gentle but not seductive. It drilled into Yun Ruoyan's ears and coiled around her burning heart. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but wrap her legs around Li Mo's body even tighter. Li Mo finally couldn't help but grit his teeth and groan. As if infected by the woman in his arms, his face finally took on the color of phoenix petals. Because of the aphrodisiac, Yun Ruoyan's senses were mostly clouded. and the remaining 20% was only enough for her to discern the man's face. Yes, she had to see his face clearly. No, she had to see him clearly. Yun Ruoyan panted, suppressing her strong urge to melt into his body. She wrapped her legs around his slender waist, one arm around his neck and the other hand carefully tracing his face. His face seemed to be carved from jade, a perfect blend of delicacy and toughness. His long ink-black eyebrows were as sharp as blades, extending all the way to his loose ink-black hair. His eyes were a strange and mysterious icy blue, and his lips were so red that they looked as if they were about to bleed. Yun Ruoyan couldn't care less about who this seductive man was. Who is he? Why is he here? Why is he with me? Her gaze landed on Li Mo's slightly pursed lips. If blood were to seep from those lips, it would surely be as sweet as honey. Finally, she gave in to her heart's desire once more and kissed Li Mo. In the past, Li Mo had refused to accept her because her cultivation was too low, and she wasn't qualified to be his cauldron. In his eyes, Yun Ruoyan was no longer just a cauldron that hadn't matured yet. Instead, she was the most intoxicating fruit in the world. As a normal adult man, how could he not eat such a delicious fruit that was delivered to his mouth? He grabbed the back of Yun Ruoyan's head, turning from passive to active, but his body leaned backwards. As Li Mo leaned back, Yun Ruoyan floated on the surface of the petal-filled water. Li Mo's legs swam through the water like a fish's tail. As they kissed, they swam toward the shore. As soon as he felt his body touch the shore, Li Mo pressed his hands against the shore and flipped over, pinning Yun Ruoyan beneath him. His hands were a little clumsier than Yun Ruoyan's. One by one he peeled off Yun Ruoyan's outer robes and tossed them onto the shore. Then he began to wrestle with Yun Ruoyan's inner robes. By this time Yun Ruoyan's body was at its peak. Her hands clawed at Li Mo's back, leaving deep, bloody scratches. The burning sensation caused her tears to flow uncontrollably, mixing with the lake water. For the first time, Li Mo felt that a woman's complicated formal attire was so troublesome. In the future as his woman she wouldn't have to wear such clothes at all. It would be best if she could be like him, draping a robe over her body and undoing it with a single hand. Creak. In the end, Li Mo chose the most direct and effective method. He tore off Yun Ruoyan's inner robes. Following this tearing sound, a white light flashed in Yun Ruoyan's mind, followed by Qiuqiu's anxious voice. Mistress, mistress, do you hear me? Wake up, wake up, wake up. Qiuqiu. Qiuqiu. Yun Ruoyan finally responded. Seeing that Yun Ruoyan had finally woken up, Qiuqiu finally lowered its two raised paws. Mistress, you finally answered me. My throat's almost smoking. Qiuqiu quickly continued. I have a way to cure the aphrodisiac in your body. Do you want my method or do you want your current method? Qiuqiu understood Yun Ruoyan very well, and it knew that she would be very depressed if she were to unconsciously become intimate with someone. Even if it was to cure the aphrodisiac and even if the other party seemed like a good partner in every way, she would still feel uncomfortable if she didn't do it willingly. Yun Ruoyan hated the feeling of being forced to do something that she couldn't control. Unless she had no other choice, she didn't have to control others. But no matter what, she didn't want to be the one being controlled. Yun Ruoyan narrowed her eyes as she looked at the face of an unfamiliar man on top of her. She raised her head and gritted her teeth, enduring the pain and the desperate need to be cured. Resolutely, she told Qiuqiu in her mind, I choose your method. Alright, then find a chance to escape. Qiuqiu replied. Li Mo finally managed to tear off the white silk shirt that was clinging to Yun Ruoyan's body. Yun Ruoyan's snow-white body under the bright moonlight in the clear lake water, and in the crimson phoenix petals, was like a dream faintly discernible in Li Mo's eyes. Done. Li Mo's icy blue eyes were tinged with a fiery red. He panted heavily. It's time to cure the aphrodisiac. To cure your aphrodisiac you have to cure mine. He held onto Yun Ruoyan's waist and was about to carry out that crucial step. Suddenly his abdomen went numb. Li Mo's entire body felt as if it had been electrocuted, and then his entire body stiffened uncontrollably. In the next instant he was lying flat on top of the delicate jade-like body beneath him. The splashes of water splashed onto both of their faces. He had actually been plotted against. Li Mo's icy blue eyes widened. He couldn't believe that the woman beneath him, who was already in a frenzy, had actually plotted against him at this moment. She had actually used spiritual energy to attack the only hidden door on his body, the Zhongji acupoint above his spiritual vortex, when he was least prepared. Yun Ruoyan once again bit the tip of her tongue, letting the sharp pain make her more clear-headed. Then, using all the strength in her body, she unhesitatingly pushed Li Mo off her body. Yun Ruoyan climbed out of the water, casually picked up a shapeless piece of clothing from the ground and wrapped it around her body. She didn't even look at Li Mo, lifted her feet and walked away without looking back. All that was left was a naked Li Mo, lying on the surface of the water like a piece of driftwood. His entire body's muscles were tightly stretched into perfect lines, and his long ink-black hair floated on the surface of the lake like seaweed. The moment after Yun Ruoyan left, there was a huge splash on the surface of the lake. Li Mo suddenly flipped over, lying on his back on the surface of the water, his hands tightly clenched into fists by his sides. What a good-for-nothing of the Yun family, what a good-for-nothing of the Yun family, what a good-for-nothing of the Yun family, what a good-for-nothing Yun Ruoyan. A voice so cold that it seemed as if it was about to turn into ice spat out from the mouth of a man who was about to be burned by all kinds of fire. Under Qiuqiu's guidance, Yun Ruoyan quickly caught a small magical beast in the Phoenix Orchid Forest. It was a small cat-sized magical beast with long, thin eyes, called a serpent. It was famous for its use of aphrodisiacs, and was the favorite magical pet of certain nobles with special fetishes. Its tears were the best antidote for all kinds of aphrodisiacs. Qiuqiu, how long has it been since I was poisoned? Yun Ruoyan asked. Ever since she had been poisoned, she had been in a daze and had lost all sense of time. Less than an hour. If you hurry, you should still be able to make it in time for the flower viewing party, Qiuqiu replied. Yun Ruoyan quickly found a courtyard in the palace. It wasn't too remote, but it was empty. Although it wasn't locked, the furnishings in the room were all covered in a layer of dust. Clearly, it hadn't been inhabited in a very long time. But what was strange was that this obviously empty room still had a rather expensive lamp filled with night pearls, emitting a faint white light that illuminated this empty room day and night. Fortunately, Yun Ruoyan found a set of women's robes in one of the empty rooms, and it fit her perfectly. It was a light purple dress embroidered with multicolored flower petals, and the collar and sleeves were embroidered with small butterflies in gold and silver thread. Yun Ruoyan brushed off the dust on the copper mirror, revealing her own face in the mirror. After the flush had receded, her face was pale without a trace of blood. Even so, without her birthmark, she was still stunningly beautiful. Yun Ruoyan hurriedly found some water, took out a bottle of potion from her pocket dimension, and hurriedly made a fake birthmark for herself. Because the light was too dim, the birthmark seemed a little dark, but she couldn't care less about it. Once she was done, she hurriedly left the courtyard and headed for the garden. After Yun Ruoyan left, under Li Qianhan's encouragement, the scions of the various families began to find opponents to spar with. In the midst of the bustle, everyone quickly forgot about Yun Ruoyan and Li Mo, who had disappeared for a short while. Soon after, the princes and princesses arrived one after another, and the garden became even more lively. Li Mo's movements were much faster than Yun Ruoyan's. By this time he was already sitting lazily on the dais, drinking with Li Qianhan. No one knew what had happened in that brief moment of his disappearance, and no one could tell what sort of rage was brewing in his lazy, contented figure. When a man as noble as a dragon had presented himself naked in front of a woman, intending to enjoy the pleasures of the flesh with her, he had been completely immobilized by her. He had even floated naked on the surface of the lake for a quarter of an hour. Li Mo had never suffered such humiliation before. When he saw Yun Ruoyan walk in silently, Li Mo tightened his grip on the cup of wine in his hand, pursing his lips as he downed the contents in one gulp. Yun Ruoyan looked around. Pei Zio was engaged in a childish spar with a few scions of the nobility. She continued to look around, but she didn't see Yi Qianying anywhere. She must have gone to find a place to extinguish the fire. But she didn't know if she'd be as lucky as Yun Ruoyan. If Yun Ruoyan harmed her, Yi Qianying would be in deep trouble as well. You come here. Just as Yun Ruoyan was lost in thought, Li Mo suddenly stood up and pointed at Yun Ruoyan, who had just walked in. Refill my cup of wine. Yun Ruoyan frowned slightly as she glanced at Li Mo. She didn't understand why he would call out to her at a time like this, so she didn't move. Come here, didn't you hear me? Li Mo called out again, this time angrily. Yun Ruoyan saw that his face was slightly flushed, but his dark eyes were frighteningly bright. She didn't know what was going on. After all, she'd saved his life twice. What kind of attitude was this? Was he drunk and making fun of her? Chapter 73. Although she was extremely reluctant, disobeying the slaughtering king's orders wasn't a wise decision at a time like this. Lowering her head, she obediently walked in front of Li Mo, took the flask of wine from Li Qianhan, and filled Li Mo's cup to the brim. Is that enough? She asked coolly, still not looking at Li Mo. Li Mo leaned forward slightly, leaning close to Yun Ruoyan's ear. But there's no rush. There's plenty of time. What do you mean? Yun Ruoyan finally looked at Li Mo. Don't try to get drunk on me, I won't fall for it. Not only did she look Li Mo in the eye, she even pointed a finger at Li Mo's nose. The princes and princesses by Li Mo's side couldn't help but gasp, including Li Qianhan. In all his years he had never seen anyone dare to glare at him, much less point at his nose. Not even his own father had dared to do such a thing. Everyone in the Li Kingdom's court paled at the mere mention of the slaughtering king. Not just in the Li Kingdom, but the slaughtering king's influence had spread throughout the entire Qinyuan continent. Killing a member of the royal family was as easy as child's play, and even the emperor of the Yu Kingdom could only complain about the death of his nephew. This ugly girl from the Yun family must have eaten the heart of a giant bear and the gall of a night demon leopard to dare challenge the slaughtering king to his face. Yun Ruoyan, what are you doing? Get out of here. Li Qianhan hissed, staring at Yun Ruoyan with his amorous eyes. Yun Ruoyan had no intention of paying him any mind. She hadn't eaten the heart or gall of the bear, but after all that torment she was on the verge of losing control. Li Mo's anger was no less than Yun Ruoyan's. Suppressing the urge to grab Yun Ruoyan and tear off her fake birthmark, as well as the urge to strip her naked in a secluded corner, he drained his cup of wine once more. Li Qianhan looked at the two men standing opposite each other, confused. He had never seen his uncle, who was as cold as a block of ice, so agitated. Sometimes he even wondered if this little uncle of his was a human, because he didn't seem to have the 7 emotions and 6 desires that a normal person should have. He just followed his heart's desires. However, at this moment he finally felt that his little imperial uncle was about to lose his temper like a human. But this anger was a little strange. Who had provoked him? Could it be this ugly girl from the Yun family? No way. That's right, it seemed like the two of them disappeared for a short while just now. Did something happen during that short while? Ouch. It was such a pity that he didn't follow them. Li Mo placed his empty cup on the table in front of him and pointed a finger at Yun Ruoyan's nose. In a voice so low that only the two of them could hear, he said, "Now immediately get out of my sight." Yun Ruoyan's brows furrowed and in a very low voice she said, "You're crazy." Then she turned around and walked away. She had just walked to a secluded corner to quell the anger in her heart when a teasing female voice called out to her. I was wondering who it was, but it's that ugly girl from the Yun family." The entire garden once again fell silent because of Yun Ruoyan, and everyone's gaze fell upon her once more. Yun Ruoyan's back was straight, her hands behind her back, and she stood quietly beside a colorful flower. She wore a light purple tunic embroidered with the same colorful patterns, which accentuated her slender figure. She was like a solitary iris, untainted by a speck of dust. If she hadn't turned around, this silhouette would have become an unforgettable memory for all the science present. But Yun Ruoyan slowly turned around. Her face was pale and the birthmark on her face was too dark. At a glance, it looked like a large black spider crawling on a white wall, naked in front of everyone's eyes. It was as creepy and scary as it could get. "Oh my God!" Several cries rang out at the same time. Not only were there female voices but there were also male voices. The Scions who hadn't made a sound couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. "Isn't she the daughter of the Yun family who just lost the duel, Yun Ruoyan? It's her. How come she's changed her clothes and her face looks even scarier? I don't know. At first I thought it was a princess, but when she turned around I was almost scared to death." The sounds of discussion rang out. But in Yunruo's eyes, there was only a woman dressed in an ornate palace dress standing 5 steps away from her. It's her again. Yunruo, I didn't expect the genius of the Yun family to become like this in 3 years. The woman's face was full of disdain, contempt and condescension. Who are you? Yunruo couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. Just what did this woman have to provoke her time and time again? Heh. The woman laughed in disbelief. You've forgotten who I am? 3 years ago, you severely injured me on the dual grounds of the family academy, and now you've forgotten me. Yunruo frowned as she tried to recall what had happened 3 years ago. Because she had been reborn, she had more than a decade's worth of memories from her past life. To her, what had happened 3 years ago was more than a decade ago. Vaguely, Yunruo recalled a few scenes. At that time, the poison in her body hadn't yet flared up, and her cultivation was unparalleled among her peers. During a duel between the scions of the Yun family, a girl had ambushed her with a hidden weapon, and she had been severely injured by her. That girl must have been the one in front of her. In the scene, the girl, who wasn't even 10 years old, was half lying on the ground, pointing at her. I, Rong Yuehong, swear that I won't let you off. Ruyao, how did the daughter of the Yun family qualify to attend the flower viewing party when she's so ugly and weak? Rong Yuehong turned back to Yun Ruyao, who had been sitting there watching the show. You were just bluffing me when you described how strong she was, weren't you? Yun Ruyao's expression changed slightly, but she quickly composed herself and smiled. Miss Rong, you must be joking. In my eyes, my sister isn't weak at all. Ah. Rong Yuehong sighed. Ruyao, you're too kind. Don't you understand that kindness will always be taken advantage of? Your cultivation and looks are top-notch even among the scions of the Yun family. If not for your kindness, the position of wife-born would have been yours a long time ago, don't you think? That's right. That's right. I really don't know what the head of the Yun family is thinking. How could he allow such an ugly and weak person to become his wife-born daughter? If I didn't know the eldest daughter of the Yun family, I'd have thought that there was no one left in the Yun family. Immediately, there was a chorus of agreement from below, as if they wanted the world to be in chaos. Yun Ruoyan opened her mouth. Rong Yuehong, you plotted against me 3 years ago and I was already being merciful by not killing you. Why? She smiled coldly. Are you here to court death today? Yun Ruoyan was already fuming with rage, and this miss just happened to be throwing herself at her. Ha! Rong Yuehong laughed hysterically. I thought you were pretty and talented, but now all you've got is your mouth. Her face darkened. If you're so capable, accept my duel challenge. Let's see who's the one courting death. Yun Ruoyan bent down and picked up a flower stalk from the bushes, pointing it at Rong Yuehong. Please. Seeing that Yun Ruoyan had agreed to her duel, but had picked up a flower stalk as a weapon. Even though she was clearly trash, she was still putting on airs. Rong Yuehong couldn't help but despise Yun Ruoyan even more. She walked back to her seat in 2 steps and took off the gorgeous palace dress she was wearing, revealing a neat set of clothes underneath. She had long since prepared to show off at the flower viewing party. Yuehong. Yun Ruoyao tugged at the hem of Rong Yuehong's dress without batting an eyelid. My sister's been acting a little strange these past few months. After 3 years of stagnation, she suddenly broke through to 4th rank in the imperial territory. Don't underestimate her. Rong Yuehong didn't seem to mind. I've already become a 6th rank blade master since last month. Today I'll make her die a miserable death for you and Ruoyu. As soon as Yun Ruoyao heard that Rong Yuehong was already a 6th rank blade master, she shut her mouth and looked at Yun Ruoyan with a gloating gaze. Although she had seen Yun Ruoyan's strength against the Yu cultivators in the imperial territory, she had always thought that it was the Pei family's spear, not Yun Ruoyan's own. Now, however, Yun Ruoyan was going to fight a 6th rank blade master with only a flower stalk. Wasn't she courting death? Rong Yuehong was still holding the willow branch in her hand and she stood in front of Yun Ruoyan. I'm not taking advantage of you. Rong Yuehong raised the willow branch in her hand and pointed it at Yun Ruoyan. Even if I beat you to death, you'll only have yourself to blame for being useless. Is that so? Yun Ruoyan smiled coldly. As the saying goes, if you don't court death, you won't die. Even if I beat you to death, you'll only have yourself to blame for asking for it. Uncle, this Miss Rong's cultivation isn't bad, and I'm afraid that the ugly girl won't be a match for her. Li Qianhan leaned closer to Li Emo. Li Emo handed him the empty cup in his hand, and he immediately filled it with wine. Do you want me to help her out later? Li Emo smiled coldly. Mind your own business. Li Qianhan immediately shut his mouth. The people fighting in the garden all stopped, and the people who were talking also stopped. Even the princes and princesses who were the center of attention were attracted by the two people who were about to fight in the open space. The two of them attacked each other at almost the same time, and the flower stalk and willow branch, which had been infused with spiritual energy from both sides, clashed together like two sharp swords. Chapter 74. The sword aura from her spiritual energy scattered the petals around the two of them, causing countless flower petals to fall like a rain of petals. The robes and hair of the people standing close to the two of them fluttered in the wind from the sword energy. What a strong sword aura, someone exclaimed. Aren't they usually just fighting with words at the flower viewing party? Someone asked innocently. Idiot, someone else cursed. Can't you tell? This isn't a normal duel. There's clearly a personal grudge between them. Both of them must be students of Kongming Academy, which is why they dared to be so arrogant as to fight for real at the flower viewing party. On the Qinyuan continent, as long as one was accepted into Kongming Academy, they would receive a high status. Even if they killed someone, only Kongming Academy would have the right to punish them. Kongming Academy had always been a sanctuary for the strong, and if one was strong enough to kill someone, they wouldn't be punished. This was why Rong Yuehong had so brazenly declared that she would kill Yun Ruoyan, and Yun Ruoyan naturally wouldn't hold back. As soon as the two of them began to exchange blows, Rong Yuehong realized that she had indeed underestimated Yun Ruoyan. To her surprise, Yun Ruoyan's spiritual energy wasn't any lower than hers. Because she knew that Yun Ruoyan was a 4th-rank blade master, she hadn't used her full strength. Instead, she had used 50% of her spiritual energy. Even a 5th-rank blade master would be able to crush a 4th-rank blade master. However, to Rong Yuehong's surprise, her 5th-rank spiritual energy was blocked by an equally strong spiritual energy. What's going on? Is she even stronger than a 4th-rank blade master? Rong Yuehong turned to look at Yun Ruoyao, but Yun Ruoyao didn't understand. At first, she had thought that Rong Yuehong was intentionally suppressing Yun Ruoyan with her spiritual energy. This was a common tactic used by the strong against the weak, but Rong Yuehong's sudden glance at her made her realize that something was amiss. Was Yun Ruoyan up to something again? In her shock, Rong Yuehong quickly increased her spiritual energy from early 5th rank to mid-5th rank, and then to peak 5th rank. At the same time, Yun Ruoyan's expression didn't change as she increased the intensity of Rong Yuehong's attacks. Rong Yuehong's expression quickly changed from relaxed to nervous and strained. When she exerted her spiritual power to its limit, the 6th level, her face had already swollen to the color of pig liver. On the other hand, Yun Ruoyan's face was ugly, but it had always been calm and unhurried, as if nothing had happened to her. This unexpected turn of events left the surrounding disciples, who had been waiting to see Yun Ruoyan make a fool of herself. What's going on? Isn't the ugly girl from the Yun family supposed to be very weak? How can she fight with Miss Rong for so long? That's right. During the Thorny Flowers battle just now, this ugly girl clearly admitted defeat in fright before it even started. How did she suddenly explode with such a strong spiritual power? Could it be that the daughter of the Yun family was hiding her strength? Some people with keen eyes finally saw through the clues. As this voice rang out, everyone let out a puzzled gasp. The only possibility for such a situation to occur was that he was hiding his strength. But why? Every single descendant of the Yun family was trying their best to show off their strength. Why did this ugly girl of the Yun family have to hide her true strength? Li Qianhan also craned his neck, somewhat surprised and delighted. What a surprise, what a surprise! He pointed at Yun Ruoyan with his wineglass and turned to Li Emo. That ugly girl still had a trick up her sleeve. What a surprise! Li Emo snorted. She's definitely holding back more than one trick. She'll definitely give you a bigger surprise. What do you mean, uncle? Li Qianhan asked. He felt that there was a deeper meaning to Li Mo's words, but he couldn't quite figure it out. Li Emo lowered his head and sipped his wine. He didn't say a word and he didn't even look at the battle. The Emperor and Empress hadn't even entered the garden yet when they heard the discussion within, and they couldn't help but frown. Eunuch Hao stood at the entrance of the garden, and when he saw the Emperor and Empress walk toward him, he straightened his back and was about to shout for help. Li Xiu gestured to him from afar, and Eunuch Hao closed his gaping mouth and returned to his bowed posture. Li Xiu was a thin man in his 40s, dressed in a violet gold dragon robe and a violet gold dragon crown. His face was pale and his beard long, and his long slender eyes shone with a shrewd light. As he gestured to Eunuch Hao, he raised his head and looked at the garden. The garden was a place in the rear gardens dedicated to the cultivation of exotic flowers and plants. It was also used by the imperial family to entertain officials and distinguished guests, and it was often used for tea parties and flower viewing parties. As a result, in order to give it a unique appearance, its walls weren't made of bricks but of vines and creepers. Through the gaps in the vines, Li Xiu could see the petals and leaves that had been stirred up by spiritual energy. He couldn't help but stroke his beard before turning to the Empress. It looks like there's an expert among this year's batch of scions, and an impatient one at that. The Empress was dressed in a bright yellow phoenix robe, embroidered with a golden phoenix spreading its wings. Her hair was adorned with 12 ruby-studded phoenix hairpins, which were both dazzling and gorgeous. I wonder whose scion he's from? He doesn't know the rules. Her brows were still furrowed. Li Xiu smiled and stepped into the garden. Everyone's attention had been drawn to the duel between Yun Ruoyan and Rong Yuehong, and they didn't even notice that the Emperor and Empress had arrived. When the Empress saw the two of them, her expression changed slightly. She opened her mouth to scold them, but Li Xiu shook his head at her. The Empress shut her mouth and stared unblinkingly at the two of them. The battle in the arena continued. Yun Ruoyan seemed to be doing this on purpose. Whenever Rong Yuehong's face swelled to the color of a pig's liver, she would weaken her attacks and give her opponent a chance to catch her breath. And when Rong Yuehong thought that Yun Ruoyan was about to run out of spiritual energy and was about to launch a counterattack, Yun Ruoyan would suddenly increase her spiritual energy and shatter her opponent's hopes. Yun Ruoyan, how dare you trick me? Rong Yuehong's face once again turned red as she glared at Yun Ruoyan. Ha! Yun Ruoyan laughed. I'm not as bored as you are. You dare deny it. Rong Yuehong's tone was still condescending. You pretended to be weak and hid your true strength so that I would lower my guard. Now that you've suddenly unleashed your full strength, do you dare say that you didn't purposely bait me to embarrass me? How despicable. Haha. Yun Ruoyan was truly amused by Rong Yuehong's words. Did this girl really think that the entire world revolved around her? Today Yun Ruoyan was going to shatter her understanding of the world and show her what it truly meant to be despicable and evil. Yun Ruoyan suddenly smiled strangely, a smile that was accentuated by the black, spider-like birthmark on her face. Haven't you figured out what's going on? She laughed as she spoke. I'm not playing with you. I'm crushing you and I might even kill you. You dare. Only now did Rong Yuehong feel fear. Although she had always been talking about death, she had never associated it with herself because she had always been the one to inflict it on others. This is the imperial palace and my aunt is the Empress. Rong Yuehong's words were strenuous, but she didn't lose any of her haughty demeanor. Yun Ruoyan retracted some of her spiritual energy so that Rong Yuehong could finish her sentence. Sensing that Yun Ruoyan had lowered the intensity of her attacks, Rong Yuehong thought that her words had worked. As expected, Yun Ruoyan was afraid. Even if you hurt me, the Yun family will be in deep trouble, let alone kill me. Rong Yuehong straightened her back and said, 3 years ago you severely injured me. Your father kicked you out of the family's academy to appease the Rong family's anger. Otherwise, how could he have been promoted by my father? If you dare hurt me again, I'll make sure you're kicked out of the Yun family. As Rong Yuehong spoke, Yun Ruoyan's expression finally changed. What did you say? 3 years ago I was kicked out of the family academy because of you. Memories of the past that she had never forgotten, but which she would never deliberately recall, surfaced in her mind. In Yun Ruoyan's last tournament at the family academy, she had lost to Yun Ruoyu and Yun Ruoyao, who had always been inferior to her. As she lay on the arena, bleeding from her mouth, Yun Lan said coldly, you've really disappointed me. After half a year you've actually regressed instead of improving. I've never seen a situation where you're regressing instead of improving. I'm afraid you'll never be able to improve in this lifetime. That's right, the family academy is meant to nurture talents, not trash. Following Yunlan's words, the instructors and the other scions all nodded in agreement. Didn't I say that growing up might not be the best you've ever been? Don't come back to the academy ever again. Yunlan left these cold words behind before disappearing, leaving Yunruoyan alone on the cold arena, enduring the scorn and mockery of the crowd. She had always thought that she had been kicked out of the academy because her cultivation had regressed. For a long time she couldn't understand why she had been kicked out of the academy. Although her cultivation had regressed, there were plenty of students who were weaker than her in the academy. But as time passed she had slowly come to accept this reason. She just hadn't expected it to be so. For the sake of his own career, for the sake of the Yun family, sacrificing an ugly daughter whose cultivation had regressed was indeed Yunlan's style. What, are you afraid now? Sensing that Yunruoyan's attacks were weakening, Rong Yuehong lifted her chin once more. I'd advise you to stop now or else. Before Rong Yuehong could finish her sentence she spat out a mouthful of blood, and her entire body was sent flying by a powerful wave of spiritual energy. Hong. In the corner the Empress shouted at Yunruoyan. How dare you hurt my Hong? Chapter 75. Yunruoyao was the first to run to Rong Yuehong's side. The scene of Yunruoyan sending Rong Yuehong flying reminded her of how Yunruoyan had killed Wang Kuang back in the imperial territory. Miss Rong, Miss Rong. Yunruoyao shook Rong Yuehong who was lying in a cluster of flowers, but her eyes were closed and she didn't react in the slightest. Yuehong, are you all right? Wake up. Yunruoyao was a little anxious. If Yunruoyan really killed Rong Yuehong, then she wouldn't be the only one to suffer. The entire Yun family would. Madame Rong hurried over and hugged Rong Yuehong, calling her by her nickname. Yunruoyao dodged to the side and turned to glare at Yunruoyan. You've made a huge mistake, do you know that? Guards. The Empress shouted and 4 burly men dressed in warriors' robes rushed into the courtyard. Capture this woman, the Empress ordered, pointing at Yunruoyan. The 4 warriors nodded and prepared to capture Yunruoyan. Uncle, what do you think? Li Qianhan was just about to get up to help when Li Mo grabbed him. Ugly girl, you've really made a mistake this time, Li Qianhan said anxiously. Suddenly Rong Yuehong coughed in the Empress's arms. Cough, 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 Hong The Empress called out anxiously. Rong Yuehong opened her eyes and called out to her aunt, but she wasn't dead. Yunruoyan really did want to kill Rong Yuehong, but as soon as the Empress and Emperor entered the courtyard she noticed. As soon as Rong Yuehong revealed that her aunt was the Empress, she had already given up on killing Rong Yuehong on the spot. However, how could she be satisfied if she didn't collect some interest? After a long period of cultivation and combat experience, as well as Qiuqiu's guidance, Yunruoyan's control over her spiritual energy had become very proficient. She had used 70% of her spiritual energy to send Rong Yuehong flying, but she had controlled the powerful spiritual energy to retract it before Rong Yuehong was seriously injured. At that moment Rong Yuehong thought that she was dead. It was the first time she had felt such a powerful spiritual attack from an opponent. It didn't feel good to brush past death. Aunt. Rong Yuehong looked at the Empress with tears in her eyes. You have to get justice for Hong. That ugly girl from the Yun family actually wants to kill me. When Madame Rong heard her sobbing, she knew that her injuries were not serious and was relieved. Don't worry. He comforted him. Aunt will definitely help you. She turned to look at Yunruoyan, but her tone was directed at the 4 warriors. Why aren't you moving? The 4 warriors received their orders once more and immediately surrounded Yunruoyan. Wait, Emperor Li Xiu said as he walked over. Only then did everyone react and hurriedly greet His Majesty and Her Majesty the Empress. Li Xiu waved a hand for the crowd to rise, then ordered the 4 warriors, stand down. However, the 4 warriors didn't immediately retreat. Instead they looked at the Empress. Emperor. The Empress looked at Li Xiu with dissatisfaction. This ugly girl from the Yun family dared to kill someone in the palace. She must be punished severely. But Li Xiu laughed. Empress, you're too serious. This was just an ordinary duel. She lost control of her own strength, so please don't take it to heart. Your Majesty, she wanted to kill me. Rong Yuehong pointed at Yun Ruian, who was standing silently by the side. The Empress had also fed her a life quintessence pill, and her injuries were almost fully healed. If I really wanted to kill you, you wouldn't be in such a state right now. And don't forget, you were the one who challenged me and you said that you'd kill me. Yun Ruian, who had been silent all this time, didn't back down. What? You lost to me 3 years ago, and you relied on your father to vent his anger on me? Now that you've lost to me again, you're relying on the Empress to cause trouble for me? So this is all you've got, Miss Rong? You. Rong Yuehong was at a loss for words. She could only curse. You ugly woman. So what if I'm ugly? Yun Ruian raised her head and puffed out her chest. Coincidentally, a gust of wind blew against her face, parting her hair and revealing her pale, ugly birthmark to the crowd. I, Yun Ruian, am indomitable and I rely on myself. The words I, Yun Ruian, am indomitable and I rely on myself, were like a stone dropped into water, leaving ripples in everyone's hearts. It was to the extent that many years later, people would still talk about how that ugly woman had said those words in front of the Emperor and Empress during the flower-admiring banquet. Well said. Li Qianhan couldn't help but slap the table and stand up. Indomitable and I rely on myself. Miss Yin, allow me to offer you a toast. As soon as he finished speaking, he took a sip from his cup. Li Mo didn't look at Yun Ruian. Instead, he continued drinking his wine as if none of this had anything to do with him. However, his lips, which had been cold all this time, curled up slightly. Li Xiu looked at Yun Ruian with a trace of admiration, but he suddenly felt that her fearless arrogance was very familiar. He couldn't help but glance at Li Mo out of the corner of his eye. Li Mo's entire body was slumped over the table as if he were drunk. Li Xiu raised an eyebrow and turned to the Empress. Empress, shouldn't we just let this matter rest? It was indeed Miss Rong who challenged Miss Yun first. That's right, and they've both been admitted to Kongming Academy. No matter what they do, only Kongming Academy has the right to punish them. That's right, and isn't Miss Rong fine? The crowd began to side with Yun Ruian. The Empress knew that punishing Yun Ruian at this point wouldn't convince the crowd, so she might as well appear magnanimous. Therefore she said, I only wanted to teach her the rules. I didn't really want to do anything to her. Since His Majesty has spoken, let's end this matter here. Aunt. Rong Yuehong tugged at the Empress's sleeves. The Empress lowered her head to look at her hands, her eyes darkening. When Rong Yuehong had landed, she had pressed her palm against the soil beneath the ball of flowers. Now her entire hand was imprinted on the Empress's robe, but she didn't realize it. Instead, she continued to stare at the Empress as if she had been wronged. Her niece's appearance and cultivation talent were both top-notch, but she had been spoiled too much and didn't know what was going on. The Empress looked at Rong Yuehong exasperatedly. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for not being good enough. With a wave of her sleeves, she brushed Rong Yuehong's hand away. Rong Yuehong stared blankly at the Empress's words, and all her anger and grievance turned into hatred. She glared at Yun Ruian. But Yun Ruian didn't shy away from her gaze. She flashed her a radiant smile that only a victor would have. That ugly smile was like a needle dipped in poison, piercing deep into Rong Yuehong's eyes. She was so angry that her entire body trembled, unable to control herself. She had grown up surrounded by countless stars, and she had been one of the brightest of her peers. Why was it that whenever she met Yun Ruian she would always be rejected? Yun Ruian was like the bane of her existence. Moreover, Yun Ruian had clearly wanted to kill her just now, and her killing intent was no less than her own. She didn't want to experience the fear of death a second time. As she thought of this, Rong Yuehong couldn't control herself anymore. Her mouth opened and closed as if she were chanting something, then she raised her hand toward Yun Ruian. Yun Ruian had already turned to return to her seat when Qiuqiu's voice suddenly rang out in her mind. Mistress, there's danger behind you. Yun Ruian stopped in her tracks and turned around. She saw a silver streak of light shooting toward her. Her reaction was extremely fast, and she had already dodged the silver streak of light several times. The people around her also dodged. But the silver streak of light seemed to have eyes, and it was only focused on Yun Ruian. Yun Ruian glanced at Rong Yuehong. Sure enough, it was Rong Yuehong's doing, and it was even a high-grade concealed weapon. Honger, stop. The Empress chided. However, Rong Yuehong seemed to be possessed by a demon. She completely ignored the sounds of the outside world, focused solely on getting rid of Yun Ruoyan. As Yun Ruoyan dodged the silver streak of light, she looked around for a place to hide. Suddenly, her gaze landed on Li Mo, who was sprawled on the table. Her instincts told her that only Li Mo could save her. As a result, she immediately changed her footwork and dashed toward Li Mo, the silver streak of light following her relentlessly. Yun Ruoyan had no choice but to crouch down by Li Mo's side like a small animal. Yun Ruoyan's eyes widened as the silver streak of light shot toward her. Just as it was about to pierce her forehead, a large hand suddenly appeared. Yun Ruoyan only saw a blur before Li Mo grabbed the silver streak of light in his hand. Ah! My God, the slaughtering king caught a high-grade concealed weapon with his bare hands. Everyone at the scene screamed in shock. Everyone was dumbfounded. Catching a spiritual weapon with bare hands was not a joke. Li Mo opened his hand and Yun Ruoyan looked up to see that it was a silver needle about 3 inches long. Give it back. Rong Yuehong's eyes were bloodshot. She quickly followed Li Mo and stretched out her hand. I'll give it back to you. Li Mo smiled coldly. Sure. As soon as he finished speaking, the silver needle suddenly flew out of Li Mo's palm and pierced into Rong Yuehong's dantian. Chapter 76. Rong Yuehong didn't cry out in pain, nor did she vomit blood. All she did was let out a muffled groan before collapsing to the ground. However, she was still clear-headed. She felt that all the strength in her body was quickly dissipating, including the spiritual mist in her dantian's qi that she had painstakingly cultivated for more than 10 years. Even the spiritual mist in her dantian was quickly dissipating. Her eyes widened as she stared at the dark figure sitting lazily in front of her. Only then did Rong Yuehong realize that the man who'd been silently watching the show was none other than the legendary slaughtering king. Li Mo beckoned to Rong Yuehong, and the silver needle flew out of her abdomen and back into Li Mo's hand. Everyone in the courtyard forgot to breathe, including the Empress and the Emperor. It was so quiet that they could almost hear the sound of the needle landing in Li Mo's palm. What a high-grade silver needle. Li Mo picked up the needle, which glinted coldly between his fingers. Everyone's gaze couldn't help but shift from Li Mo to the needle. High-grade spiritual weapons were already incredibly valuable, and high-grade hidden weapons were even rarer. In the art of forging, the more intricate a weapon was, the more difficult it was to forge. A hidden weapon as intricate as the one in Li Mo's hand would be hard to find in the entire Li Kingdom. The Empress finally snapped out of her daze. Everything had happened too quickly and she hadn't had a chance to stop it. She hurried to Rong Yuehong's side, knelt down and placed a hand on Rong Yuehong's wrist. When Rong Yuehong saw the Empress walk over, she collapsed into the Empress's arms. "Auntie, save me," she said in a weak voice. The Empress loosened her grip and Rong Yuehong's lifeless hand fell to the ground with a thud. The Empress sighed. "You won't die, but you're crippled." "Crippled? Auntie, what do you mean?" Rong Yuehong stared at the Empress in disbelief. The Empress stood up and tidied up her phoenix robe. "Your sea of qi has been destroyed and your spiritual perception has been destroyed. From now on you'll be an ordinary girl." "No, no." Rong Yuehong shook her head. Rong Yuehong shook her head indignantly. "And I'm the most talented member of the Rong family. I became a 3rd-rank blade master when I was 6 and a 4th rank when I was 10. Last month I became a 6th-rank blade master. Auntie, you can't give up on me like this. You have to help me." The Empress frowned. This crying niece of hers was giving her a headache. She had spent so much of the family's wealth to raise her, but she didn't have the slightest bit of intelligence despite all. She had already warned her brother not to spoil him too much. Otherwise, something bad would happen sooner or later. Rong Tianling, on the other hand, didn't care. Who in the Li Kingdom dared to challenge the Rong family? Even the current emperor had to greet him with a smile, so why couldn't his daughter be arrogant? However, he'd forgotten that there was one person in the Li Kingdom whom they couldn't afford to offend. The Empress turned to Li Mo a little puzzled. The Slaughtering King had always been elusive, and he rarely interfered with the affairs of the court. Why had he suddenly appeared at the flower viewing party? It had been 3 years since the Empress had seen Li Mo. If he hadn't made a move, the Empress wouldn't have noticed his presence at all. With the Slaughtering King's help, no one can save you. The Empress didn't even look at Rong Yuehong. Instead, she turned to Li Mo. You have to thank the Slaughtering King for sparing your life. Li Mo continued to fiddle with the needle in his hand when he saw that the Empress was waiting for him to speak. He lazily said, You don't have to thank me. I've never known mercy. I didn't kill her because I felt that being a cripple was more painful than being a dead person. Li Mo's calm words caused the atmosphere in the courtyard to grow even colder. Someone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. If a woman in a family didn't have the talent to cultivate, she would only be used as a tool for marriage alliances. Women without cultivation, no matter how noble their status, could only be a concubine. Rong Yuehong had been the center of attention ever since she was born, and she had always been the one to pick on others. It was hard to imagine what it would be like for her to be trampled on by others as a concubine. I don't want to. Rong Yuehong immediately broke down. And I don't want to be a cripple. Kill me, kill me. She wailed as she hugged the Empress's leg. The Empress turned to the 4 warriors in annoyance. Hurry up and send the young miss back to the Rong Manor. The 4 warriors immediately rushed forward and dragged Rong Yuehong out of the courtyard. Even from afar she could still be heard howling, Yunruan, I won't let you go even as a ghost. The Empress narrowed her eyes as she looked at the soul-chasing needle in Li Mo's hand. That was the Yun family's heirloom, and she couldn't help but be angry at Rong Tianling for letting his wastrel daughter waste such a precious treasure. Just as she was contemplating how to get the soul-chasing needle back, Li Mo said coolly, This was personally delivered to me by the Rong family. I'll take it as a token of respect. With a flip of his hand, the silver needle disappeared without a trace. The Empress's eyes twitched, but she didn't say anything else. 4th brother, I didn't expect you to join in on the fun. Li Xiu laughed at Li Mo before turning to the eunuch by his side. Let the banquet begin. The eunuch, who had been dozing off, immediately stood up and announced in a shrill voice, Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Empress, let's begin. Li Xiu smiled at the Empress, who was still standing there. The Empress wasn't willing to give up her family's treasure just like that, but there was nothing she could do about Li Mo. All she could do was walk over to Li Xiu's side and sit down. The scions of the Yun family immediately tidied up their clothes and returned to their seats as if nothing had happened. Yun Ruyao, on the other hand, looked at the empty seat beside her in shock. Rong Yuehong was a 6th-rank blade master, but what about Yun Ruoyan? How could anyone have broken through so quickly? It hadn't even been half a month since she'd left the imperial territory, but she'd already jumped from 4th rank to 7th rank? Could Yun Ruoyan really be a demon? She looked around her frantically, but she didn't see Yi Qianying or Pei Zio. Her heart was a complete mess. She squatted by Li Mo's table and was just about to get up when a slender jade-like hand stretched out in front of her. She was a little dazed. This was the hand that had caught a high-grade hidden weapon with a single hand. How strong must one's cultivation be to do that? Seeing that she didn't respond, Li Mo grabbed her arm and pulled her into his embrace. This action caused the crowd, who had just calmed down, to gasp again. The Slaughtering King hugged the ugly girl from the Yun family. Although she didn't look as annoying as before, how could the Slaughtering King eat her up? His taste was too heavy, wasn't it? Li Qianhan tactfully took a seat somewhere else, leaving enough space for the 2 of them to talk. Faced with the crowd's shocked gazes, Yun Ruoyan blushed. Although she had lived 2 lives and had experienced many things between a man and a woman, that didn't mean that she was an open-minded person. On the contrary, she was quite conservative. Even when she had been poisoned, she hadn't crossed her bottom line. How could she allow someone to take advantage of her now? What she didn't know was that, in the eyes of the crowd, it wasn't Li Mo who was taking advantage of her, but her ugly self. Let go of me, Yun Ruoyan said, pressing against Li Mo's chest. Be good. Li Mo's voice whispered into her ear. Isn't it good to rely on others once in a while? You did a good job just now. Just now. Yun Ruoyan froze. Was he referring to her seeking shelter by his side? Please, that was a life-and-death situation. How could it compare to this? Slaughtering King, you're too dangerous. I can seek shelter from time to time, but I don't dare to do it all the time, Yun Ruoyan replied, still trying to break free. Li Mo's hands didn't seem to be exerting any force and he didn't even hurt her, but it was as if he were handcuffs made of steel. Yun Ruoyan struggled for a long time but to no avail. She turned to glare at him angrily, only to see that his dark eyes were filled with mirth. She couldn't help but feel even angrier, but she stopped struggling. She wasn't the kind of person who would throw an egg at a rock. If her opponent was so strong that she couldn't even resist, then she would have to think of another way. Li Mo could feel that the petite figure in his arms was no longer struggling, and his stiff back gradually relaxed. Only then did he glance around the room. His gaze was clear and cold as if it carried the weight of 1,000 mountains. Everyone who met his gaze was startled and hurriedly averted their gazes. "Brother, isn't the banquet about to begin?" He turned to Li Xiu and asked coolly. Yes, it's begun." Li Xiu finally averted his gaze and turned to the Empress. "As usual, the banquet will be hosted by the Empress." As he spoke, Li Xiu couldn't help but glance at Li Mo and Yun Ruoyan, who were hugging each other. "This ancestor of mine has never been interested in women, and he's always been indifferent to everything. Who would have thought that he'd stand up for a woman today?" A few days ago, the Emperor of the Yu Kingdom had sent an envoy to complain that Li Mo had killed his own nephew for a slave girl. Li Xiu had thought that this sago tree was finally going to blossom. Unexpectedly, his scouts had reported that the slaughtering king had released the slave immediately after rescuing her. He was very puzzled, so he asked the spies to investigate again. Then he got the news that the female slave was a beastman, which solved the doubts in his heart. But what was he playing at today? Had this sago tree really taken a liking to the young miss of the Yun family? Li Xiu's eyes were slender to begin with, and when he smiled they became two slits. No one could tell where he was looking at when he smiled. He was sitting upright in his seat, smiling, but his two small black eyes were like tadpoles swimming to the corner of his left eye, looking at Yun Ruoyan in Li Mo's embrace. Just then he saw the birthmark on Yun Ruoyan's right cheek. Li Xiu couldn't help but twitch. What a sago tree that hadn't blossomed for 1,000 years. Chapter 77. Li Xiu's thoughts couldn't help but wander back to 10 years ago, when the previous emperor was still alive and he was still the crown prince. One day the previous emperor brought back a boy of 7 or 8 years old, announcing that he'd just found the boy, the fourth prince of the Li Kingdom, and that his name was Li Mo. Li Xiu believed the emperor's words at first, but as time passed he grew more and more suspicious, because the boy bore no resemblance to his brother at all. Both his appearance and cultivation talent seemed to surpass that of Immortal. Li Mo's personality was quite eccentric, and in the first 3 years of his life, no one had ever heard him speak a single word. He was as cold as a block of ice, and although he never scolded his servants, the palace maids and eunuchs were all afraid of him. Even Li Xiu's children, who were about the same age as Li Mo, didn't dare to provoke him. The previous emperor's attitude toward Li Mo was also very strange. Although all sorts of rare treasures and delicacies were given to him, he didn't have the affection of a father, only reverence. Li Mo grew up in the Li Kingdom's imperial palace. He entered the army at the age of 10, became a general at the age of 15. And by the age of 17 he had led the army to suppress the Beastmen's rebellion with a thunderous force. At that time, Li Xiu was very wary of Li Mo, afraid that the latter would usurp his position as crown prince. But at the same time he felt that Li Mo wouldn't. No, he didn't care. Li Xiu didn't know why he'd come up with such an absurd idea, but he could clearly see the disdain in Li Mo's eyes. Disdain for him, disdain for his father, and disdain for the entire Li Kingdom. Finally, on the day of his father's death, not only did Li Mo not try to usurp the throne, but he even handed him hundreds of thousands of command talismans and helped him secure the throne. Li Xiu still remembered the words the previous emperor had said to him on his sickbed. "Xiu, as long as you serve Li Mo well, you'll be able to preserve the Li Kingdom's 1,000-year legacy." "Emperor, do you think Mayor's dancing has improved?" The empress's voice rang out by his ear, and Li Xiu turned his attention to a beautiful woman in the middle of the garden. That was his eldest daughter, Li Mei. "Yes, Mei Er's dance is very good," Li Xiu praised with a smile. He raised his eyes and glanced at the princes and princesses sitting below him. Other than the second prince, Li Qianyuan, who was away on official business, the fourth prince, Li Qianyue, who was often absent from the palace, and a few princesses who were already engaged and waiting to be married, almost everyone else was present. No, there's still one missing. Li Xiu's smile faded a little. Why isn't the crown prince here yet? The empress coughed lightly and said, he must have been delayed by something. I've already sent someone to call him. I'm afraid it's another matter of walking a horse and running an eagle. Li Xiu's smiling face finally sank. Seeing that Li Qianxia wasn't around, the empress had sent people to search for him, but after searching the entire palace she still couldn't find him. The empress saw that the emperor's face had rarely darkened, so she turned around and ordered her attendants to search again. It was no wonder that the palace maids couldn't find Li Qianxia. He was currently busy in a dark room in the back garden. Brother Zhou, help me. I'm so uncomfortable. Yi Qianying's aphrodisiac had already reached its peak, and she writhed in agony as she wrapped herself tightly around the naked man. The man quickened his movements, straightened his back, and with a grunt, he flipped over and lay down in the flowering shrubs. Yi Qianying was finally cured of the aphrodisiac, and she fainted from exhaustion. The man rested for a moment before putting on his purple robe. As he glanced at the naked woman on the ground, his eyes shone with disdain. This man was none other than the crown prince, Li Qianxia. He had actually been the first to arrive at the summer palace. Seeing that there was no one in the garden yet, he wandered around by himself. As he strolled, he suddenly heard a familiar voice. He craned his head to look, but what he saw gave him quite a fright. Why did that ugly girl from the Yun family dress up like a fairy to scare people again? He didn't invite her at all, did he? She was even chatting and laughing with his fourth brother, Li Qianhan. It seemed that even his foolish brother had been fooled by Yun Ruian's fake beauty. He had originally wanted to expose Yun Ruian's ugly appearance, but when he thought of how he had run away in fear that night, he decided against it. If he were to expose Yun Ruian, he would become a laughingstock. Moreover, Li Qianxia wanted to see what his usually carefree third brother's expression would be like when he saw the beauty by his side suddenly change. Even so, he didn't want to go to the flower viewing party anymore. His goal at the flower viewing party was to see the beauties in the first place, and with such a disgusting, ugly girl around, how could he possibly be in the mood to admire the beauties? As a result, he planned to apply for sick leave from the Rong Empress when the party was about to start. The flower viewing party usually began after dark, when the moonstones were at their brightest. It was only dusk and it was still early. Li Qianxia strolled around the gardens. As the crown prince, Li Qianxia had been quite busy recently. First he had gone to the Yu Kingdom to visit his family, then returned with Li Xiu to the Minghuang Mountain to hunt. Finally, he'd had some free time these past few days to train his horse and walk with his hawk. It had been a long time since he'd last visited the gardens. In the distance he saw that in the corner of the courtyard, there was an exceptionally beautiful magnolia tree. Under the cover of the dusk, it emitted a beautiful golden light. His footsteps turned and he couldn't help but walk over. As soon as he reached the tree, he heard a series of flirtatious whispers coming from the bushes nearby. Brother Zhou, give it to me quick. Yi Qianying urged impatiently. No, this is the imperial palace. We can't do it here. Pei Zhou refused. I can't take it anymore, I'm so sad. Yi Qianying was on the verge of tears. Pei Zhou seemed to have sensed that something was wrong with Yi Qianying. Back in the garden, he had been dueling with someone when Yi Qianying had suddenly called him out, saying that she had something important to tell him. Pei Zhou had followed her to this secluded place, where Yi Qianying had begun to wrap herself around him. For a moment Pei Zhou felt dizzy. He knew that Yi Qianying liked him, but he'd always been the one to initiate intimacy and it was usually just hugging. He'd never crossed the line like this before. Qianying, what's wrong? He asked, grabbing Yi Qianying's naughty hand. Yi Qianying still had a shred of reason left in her. Her clothes were disheveled and she lay limply in Pei Zhou's arms. She opened her mouth and blew out a scorching breath, all of it landing on Pei Zhou's neck. I've been poisoned, save me. After saying this, Yi Qianying completely lost her mind, and began to tug at Pei Zhou's clothes. Pei Zio's heart was in turmoil and he didn't know what to do. Li Qianxiao looked disdainfully at the two lovebirds in the flowering shrubs, but at the same time he truly admired their audacity. He'd only dared to think about it, but he'd never actually put it into action. He'd wanted to summon the palace servants to capture these two and hand them over to the Empress, but upon closer inspection he realized that these two were familiar faces. Pei Zio couldn't be more familiar with them. The first time Li Qianxiao had visited a red light district, he'd been the one who'd brought him there. Because of how strict the palace's rules were, he'd often come to the Pei family to visit. The Pei family was a place of debauchery and debauchery filled with beauties. It could be said that it was Li Qianxiao's paradise. However, Li Qianxiao wasn't a fool. He knew what the Pei family wanted from him, and he told his father many of the secrets of officialdom over the years in his half-drunken stupor. Thus they didn't owe each other anything. As for Yi Qianying, Li Qianxiao only knew that she was a daughter that the Yi family had been fostering with the Yun family. Ever since she was young she'd been adorable, but who would have thought that she'd be so unrestrained? Li Qianxiao narrowed his eyes as he looked at Yi Qianying's blushing skin. So what if they were having an affair? Why did they have to resort to drugs? He couldn't help but feel a burning rage in his heart. He was very familiar with the surroundings of the summer palace, and he knew that there was a greenhouse nearby where no one would be at this hour. No longer suppressing his desire, he stepped forward and knocked Pei Zio unconscious with a single palm strike. In for a penny, in for a pound, he carried Yi Qianying to the greenhouse. Li Qianxiao took one last look at Yi Qianying, who was still lying in the greenhouse. The corners of his mouth curled up and he turned to leave. Li Qianxiao had unknowingly cured Yi Qianying of her poison, and he felt that he'd done something good for her, so his mood improved. Apricot blossoms in the dawn, deep green in the evening, smoothing the sand. Drifting through a myriad of flowers, not a single leaf stains me, not a single leaf stains me, not a single leaf stains me. Your Highness, I've finally found you. Eunuch Chong, the Empress's personal attendant, heard Li Qianxiao's humming from afar and hurriedly ran over. Eunuch Chong, what business do you have with me? Li Qianxiao asked with a smile. His heart was still in the clouds and he hadn't even recovered yet. Your Highness, the flower viewing party has already begun, and His Majesty isn't happy to see you. Eunuch Chong couldn't help but panic when he saw Li Qianxiao's relaxed expression. Her Majesty sent me to look for you and we've searched the entire Eastern Palace. So you were admiring the flowers in the Summer Palace. As soon as Li Qianxiao heard that his father was looking for him, his heart immediately sank to the bottom of the ocean. He wasn't afraid of anything, but he was afraid that his father would smile at him, and that smile made him feel especially uneasy. Fortunately, he had the Empress's protection. No longer caring about the ugly Yun Ruoyan at the flower viewing party, he quickly followed Eunuch Chong to the gardens. Chapter 78. As soon as Li Qianxiao entered the garden, the first thing he saw was Li Mo, sitting right behind Li Xiu and Yun Ruoyan in Li Mo's arms. He stopped in his tracks, his heart filled with shock. Why would his uncle, whom he hadn't seen in a long time, suddenly appear at the flower viewing party with Yun Ruoyan in his arms? Could it be that he had also been deceived by her disguise? But that ugly girl wasn't wearing a veil. Li Qianxiao immediately averted his gaze from Yun Ruoyan's face. That glance had stung his eyes. Xiao, why haven't you returned to your seat yet? What are you standing there for? The Empress rebuked. Li Qianxiao raised his head to see Li Xiuxiu staring at him with narrowed eyes. He immediately lowered his head, bowed and retreated to his seat. In the middle of the garden, two scions from different families were engaged in a sparring match. Li Qianxiao was bored by the spectacle when he heard Li Xiu's question. Where did you go just now? Father. Li Qianxiao put down his wine cup and immediately sat upright. I came early, so I wandered around the garden. When I got tired, I found a place to rest and fell asleep. Yes, this old servant found your highness in the back garden. Eunuch Chong, who was standing beside the Empress, immediately testified. Xiao, you've been busy lately. If you're too tired, you must return to the palace. You can't just rest outside. The Empress's heart ached. Why didn't you bring anyone with you? Where are Ada, Air and the others? Ada, Air, and a few of the warriors by the Empress's side were all warriors of the Rong family, specially assigned by the Emperor to protect the Empress and the Crown Prince. Oh, I gave them the day off to visit their relatives, Li Qianxiao replied. How benevolent of the Crown Prince, Eunuch Chong sighed. Only then did Li Xiu shift his smiling gaze away from Li Qianxiao. Li Qianxiao let out a sigh of relief before turning his gaze back to Li Mo and Yun Ruan. Ah, third brother. Li Qianxiao approached Li Qianhan and asked, Uncle, what brings you here today? I wanted to come, I guess, Li Qianhan replied coolly. Li Qianxiao didn't seem to mind his indifference. Why was the young uncle hugging that ugly girl from the Yun family? You want to hug me, I guess, Li Qianhan replied calmly. Forget it, pretend I didn't ask. Li Qianxiao retracted his neck. As the crowd watched, Yun Ruoyan sat on Li Mo's lap as though she were sitting on pins and needles. But on the surface she had to pretend to be relaxed and content. Your Highness, aren't your legs too tired? Why don't I sit by your side? Yun Ruoyan asked softly. No, I'm fine. Li Mo smiled. Pour the wine. She gritted her teeth, picked up the flask of wine on the table and filled Li Mo's cup to the brim. Yun Ruoyan didn't even know whether this was her 7th or 8th cup. All she knew was that the entire flask of wine was about to be emptied, and the man in front of her was clearly tipsy. Li Mo was indeed a little drunk, but not because of the wine, but because of the person in his arms. Yun Ruoyan's unique fragrance was something that only Li Mo could smell. It was an indescribably intoxicating scent, one that couldn't help but want to get close and possess her. It was like an addiction. Li Mo could only suppress this desire by drinking nonstop. Perhaps letting go of Yun Ruoyan would be the wisest course of action, but Li Mo didn't want to. Yun Ruoyan noticed that Li Mo was staring at her, his intoxicated, glowing eyes filled with a burning, indescribable emotion. She couldn't help but touch her right cheek. The fake birthmark was still there. Did the slaughtering king have a fetish for ugly women? If that was the case, she would be in deep trouble. In her panic, Yun Ruoyan began to scratch her face and the skin around the birthmark, pretending to be in pain. Ouch, it's so itchy. Her voice was pained. Your Highness, my face is itching again. Please let go of me. Should I call the imperial physician? Li Mo frowned. No. Yun Ruoyan hurriedly waved her hands. It's an old problem of mine and there's no use calling the imperial physician over. I get itchy every night and it's a heart-wrenching itch. It'll break as soon as I scratch it and then pus and blood will ooze out. Anyone who accidentally touches this pus and blood will be infected. Oh, it's that serious. Li Mo raised his brows. That's right, it's very serious, Yun Ruoyan hurriedly added. Your Highness, your body is too precious to be tainted. Li Mo wasn't as frightened or disgusted as Yun Ruoyan had expected. Instead, he reached out to touch the birthmark on her face. You're too careless and it'll be troublesome if you scratch it. Let me scratch it for you. What? You scratch it for me? Yun Ruoyan grabbed Li Mo's wrist, her mouth twitching. Your Highness, aren't you afraid of getting infected? No. Then aren't you disgusted? Not at all. As expected, Yun Ruoyan rolled her eyes in exasperation. This was a man with a special fetish. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she was shocked. She couldn't even eat when she looked at herself in the mirror. How could this person look at her with such a gaze and personally scratch the birthmark that even she found disgusting? Other than having a special fetish, Yun Ruoyan couldn't think of any other explanation. Don't worry, let me scratch it for you, Li Mo said gently. I promise I'll be gentle and won't break your skin. No. Yun Ruoyan shook her head repeatedly, her grip on Li Mo's wrist tightening. She wasn't afraid that Li Mo would scratch her skin, but rather that he would scratch off the flimsy birthmark that she'd created in a hurry. All right, I'm not itchy anymore, Yun Ruoyan quickly added. Really? Li Mo asked suspiciously. Weren't you itching just now? It really isn't. Yun Ruoyan raised her voice and opened her eyes wide, pretending to be happy. Huh. That's amazing. I'm not itching anymore. That's right, how magical. Li Mo's eyes were also wide open as he continued. You're not itching anymore. Huh. Emperor Li Xiu narrowed his eyes as he watched the duel. Suddenly he heard two people below him laughing loudly as if they were having a good time. This was strange. The god he worshipped could actually laugh? He couldn't help but ask, "Fourth brother, what are you talking about? Why are you so happy?" Only then did Yun Ruoyan realize that her voice had been too loud, and she hurriedly covered her mouth. But it was already too late. Her cries of not itching had successfully attracted the attention of the people around her once again. "It's nothing, brother." Li Mo smiled faintly. "She's itching." Yun Ruoyan quickly covered Li Mo's mouth and turned away with a smile. "Your Majesty, we didn't say anything, we didn't say anything." Yun Ruoyan was very afraid that Li Mo would spill the beans. If the emperor summoned the imperial physician on the spot to examine her face, wouldn't she be exposed? "I'm really not itching anymore. Don't talk nonsense and ruin everyone's mood." Yun Ruoyan sat in Li Mo's lap, one hand holding his wrist and the other covering his mouth, her gaze menacing. That look, how domineering. The corners of Li Xiu's eyes twitched and so did Li Qianhan's and Li Qianxiao's. Everyone who was looking at Li Mo and Yun Ruoyan felt their eyes twitch. Just what kind of ability did this ugly girl from the Yun clan have? How could she sit in the slaughtering king's lap, grab his wrist and cover his mouth? How could she threaten him with her gaze? At this moment the slaughtering king was enjoying himself immensely. He could feel the fragrance of the fair hand covering his mouth, and he subconsciously stuck out his tongue to lightly lick the palm of that hand. Ah! As if she'd been struck by lightning, Yun Ruoyan flung her hand away, her hair standing on end. "Miss Yun, what's the matter?" Li Xiu turned to her once more. "No, nothing." Yun Ruoyan immediately retracted her bristling hair and forced a smile, but the corners of her eyes couldn't help twitching. Li Mo's smile was about to spill out of his eyes, and the rage he'd felt after being ambushed by a certain someone in the Phoenix Orchid Lake had dissipated. Yun Ruoyan still couldn't break free from Li Mo's grasp, and she could only wipe her palms with the hem of his robe. "You're sick, pervert." She glared at Li Mo as she wiped her palms. Although Li Xiu's eyes were focused on the duel, his attention was entirely on Li Mo and Yun Ruoyan. Although he didn't understand why, he was certain that Li Mo was interested in Yun Ruoyan. However, that ugly girl didn't seem to be too happy about it. At a time like this, as the elder brother, he naturally had to put in more effort for his younger brother. After the matches were over, Li Xiu opened his mouth and gave his comments. His general meaning was that everyone had performed well. However, they couldn't afford to be arrogant, and they had to continue working hard to reach the next level. After saying this, he continued, "I'm sure everyone knows why the Empress and I are hosting this flower viewing party, so I won't dwell on it. None of the scions present are betrothed. The Li Kingdom has always been open-minded, so there's no need to be so formal. If there's someone you like, I'll definitely bestow a marriage." Li Xiu turned to Li Mo. "Everyone should learn from the slaughtering king. If you see a woman you like, you must take the initiative." Yun Ruoyan lowered her head, numb to everyone's stares. "Therefore, the first person I'm going to bestow a marriage between my fourth brother, the slaughtering king, and the second daughter of the Yun family, Yun Ruoyan." Yun Ruoyan looked up at Li Xiu. "What? Bestow a marriage?" Chapter 79. Li Xiu could tell that Li Mo was the one who took the initiative, while Yun Ruoyan was the one who had the upper hand. However, Yun Ruoyan's reaction was far more intense than he had expected. "I don't want to." Yun Ruoyan screamed, and her sudden burst of strength allowed her to break free from Li Mo's control. "I don't agree to this betrothal." Yun Ruoyan stood up from Li Mo's embrace and emphasized once more. Li Qianxiao had been drinking a mouthful of wine. When Li Xiu proposed that Yun Ruoyan and Li Mo be betrothed to each other, he almost choked on his drink. When Yun Ruoyan cried out, "I'm not willing," he almost spat out the wine in his mouth. She didn't want to betroth him. Everyone present was stunned. This ugly girl from the Yun family was actually refusing to betroth her to the slaughtering king. What right did she have to do that? She doesn't like the young uncle? Li Yu exclaimed in disbelief. "That's right. I think she's probably crazy. The young uncle is a godlike figure, and she dares to say no." The fifth prince, Li Qianhui, exclaimed. Everyone present was shocked except for the slaughtering king Li Mo. He looked at the girl in front of him. He was always full of surprises. From the first time he had fallen into her courtyard, she hadn't panicked or called for her family, nor had she coldly left him to his own devices. Instead, she had dragged him into her room and woken him up without anyone's knowledge. When she had approached him in his daze, he had been attracted by the faint fragrance on her body, and he had uncontrollably kissed her. What confused him, however, was that there was a hint of a putrid odor mixed in with that fragrance. When Li Mo woke up and saw the birthmark on Yun Ruoyan's face, he realized that the putrid odor had come from a poison that had been planted in her body. This poison was so peculiar that even though Li Mo had studied all sorts of spiritual herbs and poisonous herbs since he was a child, he couldn't tell what it was. However, this only piqued his interest, and before he left he made Yun Ruoyan a promise. After recovering from his injuries, Li Mo began investigating the origins of this poison. Finally, in an ancient tome he found a poison very similar to the one Yun Ruoyan had been afflicted with. The ancient book recorded that this poison was produced by an ancient sorcerer tribe in the Yu Kingdom. He went to the Yu Kingdom to look for this sorcerer tribe, but after many investigations he found that the sorcerer tribe had already gone extinct and the trail was cut off. The second time they met was on the Minghuang Mountain, in the Phoenix Orchid Forest of the hunting grounds. At that time, Li Mo had just returned from the Yu Kingdom and was in a hurry to complete a task that he had failed every year. Unsurprisingly, he failed again this year and was hit by the old man's spirit-sealing palm. Li Mo once again escaped with heavy injuries, hiding in the crown of the Phoenix Orchid tree. At that time, all the spiritual power in his body was rapidly draining away, and he couldn't fight with anyone. Moreover, if he didn't treat his injuries in time, he would lose 80% of his cultivation in a short period of time. As if by fate, Li Mo once again met Yun Ruoyan. When he jumped down from the crown of the tree and covered her with his cloak, he was once again intoxicated by her fragrance and couldn't help but kiss her. This time, however, Li Mo discovered that the rancid odor on her body had disappeared. It was likely that the life quintessence pills that he had Li Qianhan deliver to her had temporarily suppressed the poison. After that, Li Mo hid in the crown of the Phoenix Orchid tree and watched as Yun Ruoyan battled with the 20-some imperial guards. Every move was so practiced that it didn't seem like something a 13 or 14-year-old girl would be capable of at all. And when he saw Yun Ruoyan release the Feilai blade, he was certain that she must have had some sort of fortuitous encounter. That night, when Li Mo used his mental energy to investigate her residence, he discovered the Qilin beast that had once been the Beast King's contracted partner, sealed within a silver bracelet. What surprised him even more was that Yun Ruoyan was a human furnace that even he had never seen before. From then on, he knew that this wife-born daughter of the Yun family would be something important to him for a period of time. Yes, just something. Just like a cultivation manual that could help him become stronger in a short period of time, or a spiritual pill that could raise his cultivation. But tonight, the girl who had become an object in Li Mo's heart had truly stunned him. Li Mo looked at the clear wine in his cup, which slowly reflected a beautiful face that had been washed clean by the lake water. It was this beautiful girl who had plotted against him when he was at his most aroused. Yun Ruoyan, how many more surprises can you bring me? Li Mo smiled faintly as he downed the wine in his cup. Yun Ruoyan had given Li Mo far too many surprises. Her current actions didn't surprise him, but he was still displeased. Unwilling? How dare she look down on him? The corners of Li Mo's mouth curled up in an indescribable smile. You don't agree to my betrothal? Why? Li Xiu asked the question that everyone wanted to ask. Do you already have someone in mind? Oh, no. Has your family found a suitable partner for you? Not at all. Li Xiu squinted his eyes and stroked his beard. That's strange. As far as I know, your family is still alive, and it's not that you can't marry because you're a filial son. In that case, why are you doing this? Why? Yun Ruoyan paused. In the eyes of others, this betrothal was definitely a way out of her league. Be it in terms of status, appearance, or cultivation, the Slaughtering King was miles ahead of her. What reason could she come up with to convince everyone? Yun Ruoyan's head hurt. Oh, I'm still too young. I'll only be of marriageable age next year, Yun Ruoyan blurted out. That's fine. The betrothal doesn't mean that you can get married immediately. You can wait until you're of age, Li Xiu replied. Well, all right then. Seeing that this reason didn't hold water, Yun Ruoyan slowly exhaled and said seriously, actually the reason is, what is it? Li Xiu craned his neck and everyone else craned their necks to listen. Because I feel inferior. Yun Ruoyan exclaimed loudly. Oh, I see. Everyone present instantly felt relieved. No wonder, so she feels like she's not good enough for the slaughtering king, one of the Xians laughed. Right, it's not that she's unwilling but that she doesn't dare to. That's right, it's hard for anyone to accept such a frightening face for the slaughtering king. That's right, I can't accept it. Everyone else agreed. Liemo couldn't help but snicker. Yun Ruoyan would feel inferior? Despite her beauty, she had to pretend to be ugly and frighten others. Was this how someone with low self-esteem should behave? But why? He was a little curious too. Yun Ruoyan heard the laughter behind her. She turned around and saw that Liemo was staring intently at the wine in his cup, as if what they were discussing had nothing to do with him. She couldn't help but sigh in relief. Thinking back to those two inexplicable kisses as well as his flirtatious actions just now, Yun Ruoyan was certain that the slaughtering king, who was rumored to be uninterested in women, had some sort of special fetish. Li Xiu had been observing Liemo from the corner of his eye. Although Liemo hadn't made a clear statement, based on his years of experience with Liemo, his silence was a tacit agreement. Miss Yun, Li Xiu began. If you miss out on such a good marriage because of your low self-esteem, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Yun Ruoyan's mind raced, but before she could think of a response, she heard Yun Ruoyao's voice suddenly ring out. Your Majesty, please reconsider. Sister Ruoyan might not be a good match for the slaughtering king. Yun Ruoyao stood up from her seat and bowed. Oh, you must be the eldest daughter of the Yun family. Li Xiu looked at Yun Ruoyao thoughtfully. Why did you say that? Although Yun Ruoyao hadn't said a word, her gaze had never left Yun Ruoyan and Liemo, and she had seen their entire interaction. This should be the first time the two of them had met, and she couldn't figure out why they were acting so intimately as if they were old acquaintances. It was rumored that the slaughtering king had an eccentric personality. Was he just playing a prank on that ugly girl? Did the emperor really have to be an old fool to have bestowed such a marriage upon her? Yun Ruoyan no longer cared about her, and if she were to become the slaughtering king's consort, then she would forever be trampled beneath Yun Ruoyan's feet. Yun Ruoyao was anxious and frustrated, and her palms were sweating profusely. Thankfully, that ugly girl still had some self-awareness and at least knew how to feel inferior. Sister Ruoyan's low self-esteem isn't without reason, Yun Ruoyao explained. 3 years ago, for some reason, Sister Ruoyan suddenly lost her talent for cultivation. Not only that, but the birthmark on her face also worsened. In the past 3 years, Father has visited many famous physicians to treat her, and it's only recently that she's recovered some of her talent. Yun Ruoyao sighed. Although Ruoyan's talent has returned, the birthmark on her face has only worsened. Some time ago she accidentally scratched herself in the imperial territory, and it began to ooze pus non-stop. It took the family an entire month of nourishment for her to recover to her current state. To be betrothed to the slaughtering king is the Yun family's greatest honor. However, I can't hide my sister's strange illness just because of that, nor can I go against my conscience and covet this honor. Moreover, if my sister's illness recurs in the future and His Majesty and His Highness find fault with it, the one who will be hurt the most will be my poor sister Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyao raised her head and looked at Li Xiu sincerely. So, Your Majesty, please reconsider. Her words were reasonable and reasonable. Everyone present was moved by her words. Chapter 80. If Yun Ruoyan didn't know her sister all too well, she might have been moved as well. She looked at Yun Ruoyao, thinking that her sister was truly too smart. Why hadn't she thought of this reason? Although Yun Ruoyao wasn't doing this out of kindness, she still had to find an opportunity to express her heartfelt gratitude to her father for visiting famous doctors and using many spiritual herbs on him. So not only is the Yun family's daughter ugly, but she also has a nasty disease. How pitiful for her to be afflicted with such a strange disease at such a young age. That's right. Look at how her birthmark turns red and black one moment and looks so strange. So it's because of this nasty disease. Not only hasn't she been abandoned, she's even maintained her status as the sole wife-born daughter of the Yun family. They didn't hide the truth just because they could marry into the imperial family. The Yun family's reputation for benevolence is indeed well-deserved. That's right, the daughters of the Yun family must all be of noble character. Even if Yun Ruoyan can't marry a princess, she'll still be the cream of the crop. The discussion quickly shifted from Yun Ruoyan's birthmark and nasty disease to the Yun family's morals and traditions. This was out of Yun Ruoyao's expectations. She had been a little worried that her father would reprimand her for ruining the betrothal, but now she didn't have to worry anymore. The empress, who had been observing the proceedings, turned to Eunuch Chong and reprimanded him in a low voice. Who sent this invitation? Didn't they do any research beforehand? How ridiculous. I don't know either. Eunuch Chong replied fearfully. The empress glared at him fiercely, then turned to Li Xiu and said, Your Majesty, this marriage is indeed inappropriate. Li Xiu finally began to hesitate. He still hoped to be able to provide for Li Mo and his descendants for a long time to come. He couldn't allow Li Mo to marry a sickly woman. Li Xiu narrowed his eyes. Just as he was about to speak, he was interrupted by an elegant and magnetic voice. So you really do have your own reasons. Li Mo slowly stood up from his seat, his dark eyes looking at Yun Ruoyan affectionately. I've already told you that I don't despise you, so don't feel inferior. Yun Ruoyan's scalp went numb as she stared at him, speechless. But I despise you. Yun Ruoyan stared at Li Mo, her eyes wide open and her mouth agape, but she didn't dare speak the words in her heart. Sigh. Li Mo suddenly sighed. If you really can't get over it, why don't we postpone the betrothal for now? I'm quite skilled in medicine and I'm confident that I'll be able to cure you completely. How about we talk about marriage then? The corners of Yun Ruoyan's eyes twitched. I'm only 13 and you're already in your 20s. If you're really not in a hurry, why don't you just wait? Anyway, I have a lot of powder to fake birthmarks. Following this, Yun Ruoyan put on a very moved expression and said, Your Highness, Ruoyan is truly unable to repay your kindness. Then devote yourself to me. A low, seductive voice suddenly rang out in Yun Ruoyan's mind. Yun Ruoyan froze. Li Mo was smiling at her, but his lips hadn't moved at all. Then who was talking to her just now? Was it Qiuqiu? No, that definitely wasn't Qiuqiu's voice. Yun Ruoyan only felt that the voice was somewhat familiar, as if she had heard it somewhere before, but she couldn't remember where exactly. You're not feeling well, so don't stand there any longer. Come into my arms. Without another word, Li Mo pulled Yun Ruoyan back into his embrace. Li Xiu's eyes widened, the Empress's eyes widened, Yun Ruoyao's eyes widened, and everyone else's eyes widened. Third brother, why would the young emperor like such an ugly, sickly woman? Li Qianxiao turned to look at Li Qianhan, who didn't seem surprised in the slightest. Of course he wants to. Li Qianhan's lips curled up. If that's the case, well, that's great. Li Xiu immediately laughed. That's great. Do you see, the men of the Li kingdom should be as loyal as the slaughtering king? The flower-admiring banquet is not only a place to exchange cultivation and martial techniques, but also to communicate with others. Everyone, don't hold back. You can do whatever you want next. Li Xiu stood up from the red sandalwood-carved dragon throne and said passionately, My sons, once you fall in love with a good girl, don't be influenced by other factors. Listen to your heart. With the slaughtering king as a role model and the emperor's words, the slaughtering king was no exception. The princes and princesses, who were already tired of sitting, immediately left their seats and went to chat with the young masters and ladies who were pleasing to the eye. Miss Yun, I've heard that your cultivation is quite high. Would you mind giving me a few pointers? A man dressed in blue walked up to Yun Ruoyao and smiled. Only then did Yun Ruoyao recover from her daze. She hurriedly said modestly, I wouldn't dare. Let's exchange pointers. After that, she followed the young man to a corner to discuss their cultivation and feelings. Before she left, however, she glanced back at Li Mo and Yun Ruoyan, and her suspicions deepened. What do you mean? Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but ask. Pour the wine. Li Mo reclined lazily in his seat, looking as relaxed as ever. However, whenever Yun Ruoyan showed the slightest sign of struggling, an invisible force would immediately suppress her. Li Mo looked at Yun Ruoyan, who was in his arms, like a kitten whose fur was bristling. She wanted to bare her claws, but when she realized that her opponent was a lion, she had no choice but to retract them. How adorable. Pour the wine and I'll tell you. Li Mo smiled as he moved his cup closer to Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan sighed angrily. She picked up the flask in front of her and flipped it upside down, filling the empty cup with wine. Then she slammed the flask back onto the table. Is this enough? She turned to Li Mo. Tell me, what do you mean by that? Li Mo stared at the cup, his expression turning serious. Come closer, I'll tell you. Although Yun Ruoyan was still in Li Mo's embrace, her upper body was leaning away from him. In front of so many people, I can't eat you, Li Mo murmured. I don't want to tell anyone else. Alright. Yun Ruoyan moved closer to Li Mo, tilting her left cheek toward him, ready to listen. Li Mo's gaze involuntarily moved from Yun Ruoyan's round ears to her white jaw and slender neck, then to her long eyelashes, her sharp nose and her fair cheeks. Then he couldn't help but move closer again. Hey, what are you doing? Yun Ruoyan, who had been secretly kissed, let out another loud yelp. After that she looked around anxiously. Thankfully, her scream was drowned out by the noise below. Because I've discovered that I've really fallen for you. Before Yun Ruoyan could explode, Li Mo sighed. What should I do? You. Yun Ruoyan's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. You're crazy. Pervert. The garden was bustling with activity, and a crowd of young men and women sparred, chatted and laughed. The flower viewing party had reached its climax. But apart from Yun Ruoyan, Yun Ruoyao and Li Qianxiao, no one noticed that two people were missing from the party. By the time Pei Zio woke up, the sky was completely dark and Yi Qianying wasn't by his side. He wanted to stand up, but as soon as he moved he felt a sharp pain in the back of his neck. He had clearly been ambushed from behind, but why had this person only knocked him unconscious after noticing them? If it were someone from the palace, wouldn't that person have reported them? If not, who else could have appeared here at that time other than palace servants? When Pei Zio had followed Yi Qianying out of the garden, he had paid special attention to whether or not there were any signs following them. Pei Zio would never have guessed that the person who had ambushed him was his good friend, the crown prince, Li Qianxiao. Qianying, Qianying, where are you? Pei Zio called out in a low voice, but the surroundings were quiet. Other than the rustling of leaves in the wind and the chirping of unknown insects, there was no sign of a human being. Yi Qianying had been poisoned by an aphrodisiac and needed a man to cure it. They had been discovered, but no one had reported them. Then he had been knocked unconscious and Yi Qianying had disappeared. A bad premonition arose in Pei Zio's heart. Ignoring the pain in his neck, he sprinted toward the garden. By the time Pei Zio reached the garden, it was at its busiest. He looked around the crowd, but Yi Qianying really wasn't there. Even if he had a good impression of Yi Qianying, he still felt some pity for her. Earlier, when he had been summoned by Yi Qianying, someone had seen him. If something had happened to Yi Qianying, he wouldn't be able to explain himself. He was so anxious that a sheen of sweat formed on his forehead. Ignoring the pain in the back of his neck, Pei Zio ran toward the honey garden. By the time Pei Zio returned to the garden, it was at its busiest. He looked around the garden, confirming that Yi Qianying really hadn't returned. He knew that he couldn't delay this matter any longer. The longer he delayed, the harder it would be for him to explain himself. Unable to care about anything else, he walked up to the emperor's throne and suddenly knelt down. Your Majesty, I want to file a report. Li Xiu was in the middle of a discussion with the empress about the marriages of his princes and princesses, when a youth suddenly walked up to him and knelt before him. What kind of report? He asked, narrowing his eyes. Because of Li Xiu's presence, Li Qianxiao was especially well behaved that night. He sat in his seat, not moving at all. His body didn't move, but his brain couldn't stop itself from moving. The erotic scene in the greenhouse replayed in his mind. Just as he was reminiscing about it, Pei Zio suddenly walked out of the crowd and approached Li Xiu, saying that he wanted to file a report. Li Qianxiao's heart skipped a beat. His hand trembled and his wine cup fell to the ground with a clang. Chapter 81. Li Xiu faced the kneeling Pei Zio, but his sharp gaze turned to Li Qianxiao. In each of the 4 empires on the Qinyuan continent, there had been more than one instance of a crown prince usurping the throne. With history as a mirror, the emperors of the empires all treated their crown princes with both kindness and authority. Li Xiu had experienced this, and Li Qianxiao was naturally no exception. Li Qianxiao shivered when Li Xiu's gaze landed on him. Forcing himself to calm down, he bowed to Li Xiu. "I've had a little too much to drink." Li Xiu snorted coldly before returning his gaze to Pei Zio. "What case do you want to report?" Pei Zio took a deep breath and calmed himself down. Only then did he reveal how he had been knocked unconscious and how Yi Qianying had disappeared. Of course, he left out the fact that Yi Qianying had been poisoned. Yun Ruoyan, trapped in Li Mo's embrace, also pricked up her ears. Yi Qianying had poisoned her, and when Yun Ruoyan didn't see Yi Qianying or Pei Zio upon her return, she guessed that the 2 of them must have gone to find a place to neutralize the poison. She had been planning to use this incident to deal with the 2 of them once she returned, but things had developed in such a way that she hadn't expected. Yi Qianying had disappeared. "What? Sister Qianying has been kidnapped? What should we do?" Yun Ruoyan cried out in Li Mo's embrace, her concern obvious. Don't worry too much. This is the Imperial Palace and we'll definitely be able to find your sister." Li Mo had sent Li Qianhan to investigate Yun Ruoyan's situation in the Yun family, and he naturally knew that her relationship with her sisters wasn't as harmonious as it seemed on the surface. Yun Ruoyan's sudden concern piqued Li Mo's interest. What was she up to this time? However, no matter what Yun Ruoyan was up to, Li Mo was more than willing to play along with her. As a result, he turned to Li Xiu. "Brother, who would be so bold as to ambush and kidnap someone in the palace? The culprit must be punished severely." "Of course." Li Xiu's smiling face turned serious. He immediately summoned the guards and ordered them to search the entire palace. They had to find the missing Yi Qianying and capture the culprit. In his anxiety, Pei Zio hadn't noticed Yun Ruoyan and Li Mo until Yun Ruoyan's scream caught his attention. When he saw Yun Ruoyan sitting in the slaughtering king's lap, he couldn't help but stare at the 2 of them for a moment longer. Yun Ruoyan suddenly raised her head and met Pei Zio's gaze. Although Pei Zio was surprised, he didn't panic. He only looked away after exchanging a glance with Yun Ruoyan. Seeing that he didn't seem to be lying, Yun Ruoyan couldn't help feeling suspicious. Had Yi Qianying really been kidnapped? So who could have done it? The royal palace of the Li Kingdom had always been heavily guarded, and it was extremely unlikely that anyone would be able to break through the layers of security and enter the rear courtyard to commit a crime, unless the perpetrator was someone from the palace. Yun Ruoyan's gaze swept across the yard. Some of the young masters in the yard were looking in her direction, discussing what had happened. Some were still doing their own things and weren't affected. However, not a single one of them looked like a thief. Yun Ruoyan's gaze swept across the yard, finally landing on the crown prince, Li Qianxiao. When she saw him hunched over in the same position for a long time, her heart skipped a beat. Although Li Qianxiao was trying his best to hide it, the nervousness radiating from his heart couldn't escape Yun Ruoyan's eyes. When she recalled that the crown prince had arrived long after the flower viewing party had begun, as well as his character, Yun Ruoyan's heart immediately cleared up. She couldn't help but curl the corners of her mouth, revealing a smile of understanding. What happy memories have you had?" Li Mo whispered into her ear. "Can you say that you're having a good time with me?" Yun Ruoyan's scalp tingled as Li Mo's warm breath brushed against her ear. She turned around with a fake smile. "Slaughtering King, would you be interested in watching a good show?" "Since Yen'er is in such a good mood, how could I not accompany you?" Li Mo smiled. The 2 of them smiled at the same time. "Young Master Pei," Yun Ruoyan began. "May I know where you and my cousin were attacked? Could you bring us there to take a look? I'm so anxious that I want to search for them myself." "Sister Ruoyan, you're right. We can't just sit here and do nothing." Yun Ruoyan's request received a rare approval from Yun Ruoyao. Li Mo also spoke up. "The palace is so large and it'll take a long time to search through every nook and cranny. In any case, the banquet is almost over, so why don't we all help out? Young Master Pei will lead the way, starting from the place where they were attacked." Li Xiu naturally wouldn't object to Li Mo's suggestion. As a result, the emperor, empress, and the 30-some scions followed Pei Zhou to the rear garden. Pei Zhou brought them to a small garden in the northwest corner of the garden where he stopped. This is the place where I was knocked unconscious. Yun Ruoyan looked around and frowned. Young Master Pei, why would Sister Qianying follow you to such a remote place? Yun Ruoyan's question immediately caused the crowd to whisper amongst themselves. The youths who were nearing adulthood and those who had just reached adulthood were beginning to understand the relationship between a man and a woman. Naturally, they could understand why a man and a woman would hide in such a remote corner. Sister Ruoyan, please don't misunderstand everyone, Pei Zhou hurriedly explained. Qianying wasn't the one who followed me here. She was the one who told me to come here. I have a witness. I can testify for Brother Pei. Just then, the blue-clad man who had struck up a conversation with Yun Ruoyao walked out. Before the banquet began, Brother Pei and I were exchanging martial techniques. Missy suddenly came to find Brother Pei, saying that she had something important to tell him. She seemed really anxious, so young Master Pei left with her. I saw it with my own eyes. Oh, I see. Yun Ruoyan nodded. What urgent matter did my cousin have to tell you, young Master Pei? Pei Zhou was so eager to extricate himself from the matter that he almost blurted out the fact that Yi Qianying had been poisoned, but he swallowed the words back down. If he did, it would only make things worse, so he decided to pretend that he didn't know anything. I don't know either. Before she could say anything, I was knocked unconscious. Finding Qianying is the most important thing right now, Yun Ruoyao said anxiously. All right, everyone, don't just stand there. Let's look around. As soon as Li Xiu gave the order, the crowd spread out to search the garden. A eunuch brought over chairs for Li Xiu, the empress, and Li Emo, fourth brother. Let them search. Let's rest for a while. Li Emo pulled Yun Ruoyan to Li Xiu's side. As soon as they sat down, as if remembering something, he turned to Li Xiu. Brother, do you remember the greenhouse nearby? Of course I do. Li Xiu replied with a smile. That greenhouse used to be where he grew his flowers and plants, but when Li Emo arrived, he took it over without a word, plucked out all his exotic flowers and plants and replaced them with medicinal herbs. Li Xiu's heart ached for a long time. Although Li Xiu was old enough to be Li Mo's father, he always seemed to lose out to Li Emo, fourth brother. Why are you suddenly asking about this? I haven't been to the summer palace in a long time. Would you be willing to accompany me to that greenhouse? Li Emo smiled. It was rare for a deity who would disappear for 2 or 3 years to be in the mood, and Li Xiu was naturally willing to accompany him. Fourth brother is in such a good mood, how can I not accompany you? Li Xiu said as he stood up. Let's go now. Li Qianxiao's legs buckled when he heard this and he almost fell to the ground. Xiao, are you feeling unwell? The flower viewing party's already over, so why don't you head back first? The empress suggested. Li Qianxiao felt as if he'd been pardoned. Just as he was about to nod, Li Xiu, who was walking in front of him, spoke up. How could a man be so weak? It's rare for your uncle to be in such a mood, so keep him company. Li Qianxiao's heart sank and he couldn't help but tremble as he followed behind. As he walked, he thought that no one could possibly have noticed what he'd done. Besides, he was the dignified crown prince. Who would dare to casually suspect him? Even if they suspected him without solid evidence, as long as he didn't admit it, who would dare to treat him like this? As he thought of this, his heart slowly calmed down and his legs stopped trembling. The moonlight was bright tonight, and with the moonstones scattered throughout the garden, visibility was almost as good as during the day. Yun Ruoyan was walking by Li Mo's side, and as she tilted her head slightly, she saw Li Qianxiao's expression change. Her gaze landed on Li Qianxiao's violet gold crown, and when she saw that the bead on it was trembling so much that it looked like it was about to fall off, her smile widened even more. Eunuch Chong, who was in charge of the garden's affairs, was most familiar with the surroundings and he led the way. Before long they arrived at the greenhouse where Eunuch Chong turned around and bowed to Li Xiu and Li Mo. It's too dark in the greenhouse, so allow me to light the lamps. After saying that, he walked into the greenhouse with a few young eunuchs. Although he was confident that he wouldn't be exposed, Li Qianxiao couldn't help but clench his fists nervously. Li Xiu looked at the greenhouse and couldn't help but sigh. I haven't been here for a long time. I still remember that I used to raise many rare and precious flowers and herbs here. Unknowingly, a day has passed since I started tending to them. Those days of leisure are gone for good. Brother, it's the people's fortune that you're so diligent in governing the kingdom. Now that the Li kingdom is the leader of the four kingdoms, you've contributed greatly. Li Mo's rare flattery immediately elicited a hearty laugh from Li Xiu. Fourth brother, you're too kind. At this moment, a cry of alarm suddenly came from the greenhouse. Then Eunuch Chong stumbled out with a few young eunuchs and shouted in a shrill voice, Your Majesty, there's a woman in the greenhouse. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.